Okay, it's 6 o'clock on February 27th, 2023, and I will call this meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, and just for the record, Board Member Mark Carrata is absent this evening, and we also have Town Council Paul Haverty joining us for this meeting. So first up, we have public service announcements. Ken?
Yep, so we have a few. So the Chelmsford Select Board and School Committee will meet on March 13th to appoint one representative to the Neshoba Valley Technical High School Committee for a 3-year term ending March 31st of '26. Applications are available on the town website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. Applications should be forwarded to the town manager's office here at 50 Billerica Road by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, March 8th. Our next announcement concerns the school. So the Springtown meeting, in preparing for the Springtown meeting that's coming later in April, we're informing the public that the Chelmsford School Committee will be holding a budget hearing on the fiscal 2024 superintendent's recommended budget on Tuesday, February 28th at 6 p.m. at the Chelmsford Public School Administration offices located at 230 North Road. The budget hearing will be televised live on Comcast Channel 22, Verizon Channel 26, and live.chelmsfordtv.org.
I thought it was in the 30s.
Yeah, I'm questioning the same on the channels, but
Well, 22 is right, but Verizon, I think
I
it's
thought it was higher than that.
Yeah.
The budget hearing will provide an opportunity to hear about and discuss the budget recommendations with members of the Chelmsford School Committee and Central Administration. A complete copy of the fiscal year 2024 superintendent's recommended budget will be located at the following link. There's a long link there, which you can actually see on the agenda tonight for the Board of Selectmen meeting, and you can click on it and see the budget there. That's on the main webpage on the town. Just go to the calendar, click on tonight's date, and you'll see the Select Board meeting listed with the agenda. Next up, we have Narcan training sessions. Save a life, learn how to recognize an overdose. And these are free Narcan training. And they're going to give free Narcan to anyone who attends the training. This is going to be presented by the Chelmsford Health Department. February 28th, there are 2 sessions, one at 12 p.m. and one at 6 p.m. They'll have one March 7th at 6 p.m. and one March 16th at 1 p.m. They'll be held at the Chelmsford Town Hall downstairs in the Fire Department training room on our lower level. It's open to all. Registration is required and space is limited, and you can register it at www.chelmsfordma.gov, or you can call the Chelmsford Health Department with any questions at 978-250-5241. Our next announcement is CPR training, learn hands-only CPR, presented by the Chelmsford Public Health here. This 15-minute training is for learning purposes only. This training is not used for CPR certification. If you have questions, you can reach out to the Chelmsford Health Department again at 978-250-5241 for any questions. That training will be held on Tuesday, March 21st at the Chelmsford Library, the main branch, at the McCarthy Meeting Room from 1 to 6 p.m. And there'll be new sessions every 15 minutes. Training includes assessing the scene for safety, calling 911, giving chest compressions, practice on mannequins, and AED basics. And that's open to the public. Welcome to all ages. Our last announcement is Buried in Treasure Workshop. And if you have too much stuff and you need to downsize, and if you look around your house and you have stacks of papers in every corner of your house, or if your closets, cupboards, and storage areas are overflowing with stuff, is it difficult to use your kitchen or bathroom utility areas? Do you struggle with letting things go? Do more items come into your home than go out? Does it take a long time to find a particular item or important document in your house? Are you embarrassed to have someone visit your home? Do you want to declutter but are overwhelmed on where to begin? If you can say yes to one or more of these questions, then our 15-week in-person Buried in Treasure workshop may be for you. This is a relaxed, non-judgmental program that teaches you to build insight, skills, and strategy to help declutter, get organized, and reduce acquiring. The program addresses all clutter levels from just a few messy areas to excessive collecting to hoarding tendency disorders. Class sizes are up to 10 students, 18 years plus, and 2 facilitators. Registration is required. They'll be held every Tuesday afternoon starting March 14th. They're in person from 2 to 3:30 at the Chelmsford Public Library, the main library here. Class and workbook are free, and it's open to all Massachusetts residents. If you have any questions, please call or email Taryn Angel with any questions, or to register, you can call 978-250-5241 or email tangel@chelmsfordma.gov. And this, too, is sponsored by the Chelmsford Health Department.
Thank you, Ken. Next up, we have public input. Paul, in one of the previous versions of the agenda, we had public input under the litter complaint and nip bottles. It seems to have disappeared. So I'll just say, if you are here for the subjects of the nip bottles and the litter created by them, we are going to take public input as part of that agenda item. If you have any public input you would like to convey on any other agenda topic or anything that's not on this agenda, now is your time to speak. So in the Zoom room, we have Joe Slattery's raised his hand, and I would just ask anyone who speaks to please give your name and address for the record. And you're on mute, Mr. Slattery.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Joe Slattery from 12 Sylvan Ave. So I called in to discuss, I know there have been recent discussions on the traffic on Sylvan Ave, some discussions about potentially adding some signs, and then that decision was, I guess, removed. So I guess my question is, what are we going to be doing as the town to protect the citizens, our children, from what is a public safety issue on Sylvan Ave right now, with the amount of traffic, the speed at which the cars travel, and the fact that there are so many young children living here?
Shoot,
Paul-
I'm sorry. I was gonna
Go
ask
ahead.
him what time of the day.
Sure, we can
specifically.
ask a clarifying question. We're just not going to deliberate. Go ahead, ask your
Sorry.
question.
No.
No, your question is what?
My question, Mr. Slattery, any special time of the day? I mean, are you talking about early in the day, later in the day, all day? Because I'm familiar
I'm
with the
sorry,
area.
I'm having a hard time understanding you.
The question from Board Member Dixon is, are you noticing any particular time of day when it's worse than others?
Yeah, so well, I notice it when I'm outside with the kids, and that's typically after school and then before school as well.
Paul, do we forward this back to the Traffic Committee for another look?
Yeah, we can, and
Contact Mr.
we'll-
Slattery directly if they need to?
Yeah, I think I'll ask Chief Spinney to contact Mr. Slattery directly.
Yeah.
I have his contact information.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fine. And again, just to be clear, the advisory committee is, as the name suggests, advisory committee. The select board of the traffic commissioners in the town, if the board wishes to put signage or what have you, then we will execute whatever is decided. But what we will do here is we'll contact Mr. Slattery. I don't know if you want to, we can decide where to go from there, in terms of you want to do more listening sessions, more discussion with the neighborhood, or if you just want to take further action. We've heard from the chief, we've heard from the Public Works and others who have looked at this problem, and we've, as you know, we've run radar and other assessments on that. So our next step will be to have Chief Spinney reach Mr. Slattery directly.
We can put it on a future agenda
Sure.
after you do that. Okay,
So does he,
thank you.
he followed that? I don't know if he can hear us.
Mr. Slattery, did you hear that?
Yep, I can hear there's going to be a follow-up, and Chief Spinney is going to reach out to me.
Yes.
Okay. I've spoken to Chief Spinney several times on the issue. Oh, I don't see anyone that was mentioned that actually lives on this road that deals with the traffic, that watches their loved ones be at risk so very frequently. So thank you for your input. I appreciate your ear.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public input? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee vacancies.
Committee vacancies for February 27, 2023. The Arts and Technology Education Fund Committee has one unexpired 3-year term. Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, Advisory Committee has one 3-year term. The CCA Advisory Committee is looking to fill 2 seats. Those are 1-year terms. Commissions on Disabilities has one 3-year term. Community Action Program Committee, 4 seats available to 1-year terms. Community Preservation Fund Committee, 3-year term. Council on Aging Board has a 1-seat available 3-year term. Cultural Council has one unexpired 3-year term. Holiday Decorating Committee has one 1-year term. Neshoba Valley Technical High School Committee, again, we talked about this earlier, apply by 3/8/2023, but that's one 3-year term. Parade Committee, all applicants are welcome. Those are 1-year terms and they expire each July 31st. Permanent Building Committee has one 3-year term. Recycling Committee is looking to fill 1 seat. That's a 1-year term. Roberts Field Advisory Committee has one 1-year term. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application available on the town website. For more information, please contact the town manager's office at 978-250-5202 or email the town manager at tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov.
Okay, next up, we have the 1-day beer and wine license for St. John's Church. Is anyone from the church here?
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Jane Saki. I live at 5 Jefferson Drive in Tingsboro. I'm the head chairman for the Hospitality Committee at St. John the Evangelist Church at 115 Middlesex Street in North Chelmsford. On March the 11th of this year, we are going to be holding a St. Patrick's Day dinner party. It's going to have some entertainment there. And I'm here tonight to apply, ask for a special 1-day license for beer and wine. And I would appreciate your consideration for approval.
Are there any questions?
It's an annual thing.
Okay, if not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the 1-day beer and wine license for St. Patrick's Day dinner to be held on March 11, 2023 at St. John's Evangelist Church at 115 Middlesex Street in North Chelmsford.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 in favor, 1 absent. You're all set. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, we have a number of presentations for you this evening. The first one is the town's financial audit for the fiscal year 2022, and Matthew Hunt who's a CPA of Clifton Larson Allen is here this evening to present their findings, and they're joined by Finance Director John Souza and Town Accountant Darlene Lucier.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the board for having me here tonight. I'm Matthew Hunt with Clifton Larson Allen, better known as, or easier known as CLA. So we're here to
Excuse me,
discuss.
is there a file here that you want me on? There were multiple files in the packet.
I think he's just going to highlight the financial statements.
Okay.
And if you need that.
Yes, we'll be going through, do some highlights of the reports. Again, Matthew Hunt from CLA, here to talk about the town's fiscal year 22 audit. Before we get into some of the numbers and the specifics in the reports, wanted to give sort of an overall executive summary of the FY 22 audit. Your financial statements received what is referred to as an unmodified opinion. That is the best auditor's opinion that is available in an audit of a financial statement. It basically means that your financial statements, based on our audit, are free of any material misstatements. There are also no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control to report. There are also no non-compliance issues or material non-compliance issues related to laws and regulations as it relates to the financial statements. When it comes to the federal grant portion of your audit, there is an unmodified opinion as well on that part of the audit. There are no compliance findings as well related to the federal grant portion of your audit. And lastly, there is only one internal control finding associated with the single audit portion of your audit. So that's sort of the overall executive summary, overall a very clean audit for the town. Jumping into some of the numbers, if you did want to pull up some numbers on the screen there. Page 10 of your financial statements.
Okay, am I in the right document? Because we
yeah.
don't seem to have what he's reading.
No, if
over.
you go to page 10, he's
Okay,
going
thank you.
to cite
I
numbers.
am referring,
Just tell me where to go.
yes, I am referring to a
Politely.
document. This document I'm reading from is not necessarily part of your packet per se.
Okay.
But I am making reference to some of the reports. So on page 10 of your financial statements, that's what's called your full accrual financial statements. This is where you'll find all your information about all your long-term assets, long-term debt, et cetera. I do believe that might be page 10 of the PDF. It would be page 10 of the report. I apologize. I didn't know that you were going to be pulling this up on the screen per se. But looking at that particular report, really the things that I want to focus in on are your long-term liabilities, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about these. But it's really three large liabilities that come into play on your government-wide financial statements. It's your pension liability of approximately $100 million, your OPEB liability of about $82 million, and I know after me, your actuary will be speaking a little bit more about your OPEB liability, so I don't want to steal his thunder, and then also your long-term debt, which is approximately $64 million at the end of the year. So when you look at that full accrual financial statement, you will see, and this is very common amongst municipalities, you will see a deficit in your unrestricted net position on government-wide. That is because your OPEB liability and pension liability are not fully funded. But again, that's very common amongst municipalities. Also on your financial statements, want to zone in on the general fund, which is on page 13 of your financial statements. Specifically, your fund balance numbers, those are numbers that your bond rating agencies really look at as part of evaluating the overall town's finances. Your overall general fund balance at the end of 2022 was a little over $22 million. Specifically, the number that the bond rating agencies do like to zone in on is that unassigned fund balance number that you see in the general fund column of about $21 million. Specifically, that $21 million, want to sort of hone in that number. It includes $15 million of your stabilization funds. That's part of that number. One of the things that we like to do is take that number, that $21 million, and see how it compares to your annual expenses. It gives you a nice ratio. That ratio at the end of the year is about 13.5%. Comparatively speaking, that's very well amongst other municipalities. So the town's done a good job of building up their general fund reserves. On page 15 of the financial statements, you'll see the results for the general fund for the year. And you'll see that even though the general fund's in a very strong position, it did have a decrease in FY22 of about $1 million. The main reason being there is that if you look at your budget to actual financial statement, you'll see that the town used about $7.5 million of reserves as part of their FY22 budget. So whenever you have a budget that's got a significant amount funded by reserves, sometimes you do see a small decrease in your general fund, but again, overall, in a very strong position. Couple other sets of numbers that I want to point out, pages 17 and 18 of your financial statements is where you'll see your enterprise funds. So really want to focus in on your sewer and stormwater enterprise funds.
Right.
Those funds are also in very strong.
Page numbers aren't tracking.
Yeah, the bottom of the bottom.
That's 17.
Yes, that's the page 17. I believe that's your net position statement for proprietary funds. You'll see that your sewer enterprise fund has net position of about $2.4 million, and your stormwater enterprise fund has net position of about $1.2 million. So again, in very strong position in your enterprise funds, and your enterprise funds also had strong increases in revenues during FY22 compared to the previous year. So last pieces of the financial statements I want to talk about, we referenced them a little bit earlier, were those three main long-term liabilities. The footnote section of your report, not to make you keep navigating, but starts on page 40 of the report. That's where you'll see some additional information on your long-term debt. Overall, your long-term debt at the end of the year was approximately $63.5 million. During the year, you issued about $6 million in new debt and retired about $11 million of existing debt. Your overall debt service as a percentage of your expenses is only 8.7%, so your debt service is not taking up too much of your overall budget. Next
What-
footnote.
What number would be?
I would say when you get to maybe sort of more greater than 10% is when you would start to really maybe analyze it and see. Now, of course, your debt service could be at that level, and there could be reasons for it. There could be significant capital needs that came up that you had to address. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but when you start to get over 10% is maybe when you'd start to analyze it a little bit more. OPEB liability as well. Starting on page 42 of your financial statements. Again, your actuary is going to be on after me, so I don't want to get into OPEB too much. He'll be able to tell you a little bit more. But your overall liability at the end of the year was about $83 million. That is a pretty significant increase over the previous year, about a $32 million increase. Your actuary can get in some of the reasons. It's really caused by the fact that every 2 years you have to have an actuarial evaluation. There's new assumptions that go into play every time you do that, so sometimes that can impact the liability. And then the last footnote, page 47, starts on page 47, relates to your pension liability. Of course, your pension liability is really just a portion of the overall Middlesex County Retirement System's overall pension liability. The town of Chelmsford reports a percentage of that. On their financial statements, that liability was about $100 million. At the end of the year, that was about a decrease, about a $10 million decrease from the previous year. So those are really the highlights of your financial statements. And so really the only other report, if you wanted to pull it up, is the other report that we issued, known as the GAO and Uniform Guidance Reports. It's more commonly known as your single audit report. So here, necessarily, you could flip to pages. I don't want to necessarily make you have to do that, but you'll see within this report, there is a summary of all the different federal grants the town received and what you spent. That came to a total of about $6.5 million. For this year's audit, we had to specifically audit what is referred to as your child nutrition cluster grants, basically your school lunch, school food program. So as part of that audit, we issued an unmodified opinion on that audit. There are no compliance issues that came about as a result of that audit. There was just one finding that we did come across, which we would consider fairly benign. One of the compliance requirements with this grant is that you have to document that you verified that all the vendors that you used as part of the grant program were not suspended or debarred from being used, from being paid federal grant funds. That documentation was not done for FY22, so that's the nature of the finding. But I do want to point out that none of the vendors that were used were suspended or debarred by the federal government. So this is really just more of an internal control finding to make sure that that gets documented every year. So that's essentially the summary of the results. I'd be happy to take any questions anyone has.
Questions? You all set, Paul?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
great
you look
news.
like you were going to say something.
No.
Okay, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you very much. Have a good night.
And that's an easy fix, the controls.
Yeah, and that way, the schools
It's
addressing that.
within the school department, it's not within the school,
Darlene?
School lunch
maybe go to-
I had a discussion with the school business manager, Joanne Colin Johnson. She's actually working with the school lunch manager, because she's the one that actually hires the vendors through the school lunch. So they're going to be running if they're going to be doing any contracts or any work with a vendor, they'll make sure that, they'll be checking that to make sure that none of them have been disbarred or are not good to be useful. So I think in that report, Joanna wrote a little footnote, just kind of a response to Matt's comments. So they'll be handling that internally with their school lunch program.
And Dr. Lang is actually participating remotely in this. He's familiar with it. It's not a concern. And again, I think congratulations should go out to all of them, both the school and the town officials, Darlene, obviously our accounting officer, and similarly on the school side. I mean, it really speaks well for the ongoing success they've had in terms of dealing with the challenges of municipal government finance, but also in terms of the extraordinary influx of federal outside monies as a result of the pandemic and the monies going into the district and the town general government during this period. So.
Well, not only that, Paul, but keep in mind, we just switched auditors. So
Right,
you got
exactly.
a clean bill of health from a second auditor, so,
Right.
I mean, that is.
We changed.
Good. It's good news.
But it's great to hear, though,
Yeah.
that's what we're hoping for.
Thank you.
And then now transitioning to the second part, as was previewed in Mr. Hunt's report, Parker Elmore from Odyssey Advisors is joining us virtually. He's worked with John Souza and Darlene, sort of examining the OPEB, and he does have a PowerPoint presentation that he's going to walk through tonight regarding the
Is that the right one?
the post-employment benefits of the town.
Can I share a screen here?
Hi, there we are. Good evening, Parker.
Yeah, can I share a screen here or no?
Or you can,
No, we have to do it through,
my
my
run it.
computer's-
We have your report online. You can just
Can-
tell
can
us
you-
what page.
yeah, can you
Okay,
see
I'm-
it? Can you see
We're
it?
planning on doing the report, we can do the report, I suppose? Sure.
Can you see
yeah,
it?
I can see that, yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess, go to the next page and just give it a quick about us, which is, take 10 seconds on that. Been doing this stuff since '98, I've been doing it a lot longer than that. Just means I'm old. We're clients in 37, 38 states. We're in Europe, South America, Australia, have offices on the East Coast and the West Coast. And on to the next page. So the all important, what the heck happened? Your numbers did go up by a fair amount. No surprise. Matthew noted, we are one of the two problem child, us in pensions. It is what it is. You and every municipal government around, who offers these benefits in this situation, especially in Massachusetts. I will tell you that compared to many Massachusetts, you're probably the top 20% in terms of funding. So you're good in that regard. Everyone goes, well, how do I compare? From a comparison standpoint, you're doing well. But again, it's the best house in a bad neighborhood argument. Everybody has huge debts for OPEB, and you are not any different in that regard. Now, part of this is why the numbers go up by so much. Well, part of it, they're supposed to go up anyway, passage of time. But there's really a couple of key things that change. One is, we talked to Darlene and John, and without them, this stuff doesn't get done. So I very much appreciate their help. But basically, there was a lot more active employees this year. Part of that is perhaps some had been previously reflected. Part of that is some increase in staffing on the schools due to grant money and things like that. And also a fair number of retirees that went up more than expected, which is not unusual in the COVID environment. As we said, we do this every 2 years. And so a lot of people saw people who are of retirement age who might have normally worked 2 or 3 more years said, nope, I'm out. So we saw a lot of people retire, not just you guys, everywhere across the board, retired earlier than expected. And when that happens, people get OPEB for more years, therefore your liability goes up than would otherwise have been expected. The other side of this is your assets had a bad year. So your assets earned $2 million less than expected, which sounds terrible, but the thing I try and remind people is the prior year they earned 2.7 million more than expected. So if you take a slightly longer time frame view on this, the assets did fine. You can't get hung up on what happened in one 12-month period, but rather take a longer term look, and your assets did fine. They are very aggressively invested. However, I would say this is long-term money. And again, I'm not your investment consultant, don't want to be your investment consultant, don't want to manage your money. But this is long-term money. The fact that it's aggressively invested makes a lot of sense because you're not going to be touching this money for 20, 30, 40 years. So again, your liabilities went up by a fair amount. And we'll talk about why in a couple seconds. On the next page, we'll talk about expense items. In the OPEB and the municipal context, these don't mean a heck of a lot, so I'll focus on a couple of them. Financial statement expense, oh boy, it went up by a lot. I mean, it matters, but this is not a corporation where you go, hey, our earnings per share went down by X and therefore all our bonuses got hit. As far as I know, you guys are not doing that. I've never met a municipality who is, so we'll leave that one alone. The service cost is the value of benefits being earned by every active employee. So if you think about it, Johnny or Mary work for you and they make $50,000 a year. They're also earning a benefit payable in retirement called OPEB, or retiree medical benefits. That's about $1,700 a year per employee. So think about if you're paying them $50,000 a year, they're getting a $1,700 deferred compensation benefit in the form of OPEB payable in retirement. Your trust contributions, you put in $1.9 million, good for you. You keep on funding, that's great. And the discount rate went down. Now the discount rate, there's about 5 different elements to go into calculating that. GASB has a very particular way you have to calculate the discount rate. And those are really, what are municipal bond ratings? What are municipal bonds earning? How are you investing your money? How much money are you putting in every year? What do you currently have for assets? And what are the future projected benefit payments? So you take those 5 items together, and different ones have different weights depending on where you sit on things. In your case, it went down by about half a point. That added about $6 million to your liability due to that change. The key thing I would tell people is, do not change the cost of your plan by a penny. Assumptions do not change costs. They simply change when we reflect liabilities on your balance sheet. But if I could assume everybody lives to be 105, your liabilities go way up. I assume everybody dies at 72, your liabilities go way down. Neither one of those have any reflection of what's really going to happen. They simply reflect our best estimate as of that point in time. So on the next page, we talk about kind of what happened. So we talked about higher turnover than expected. You had more people leave earlier than expected, again with COVID, not totally unexpected. That cut your liabilities by about $6.1 million. Your premiums went up by slightly less than expected, saved you another $1.5 million, all good. But the discount rate going down added $5.7 million to the liabilities. There's this thing called aging factors. Long story short, under GASB and actuarial math, we have to take the premiums that you're paying and adjust those to make them age by age. So the fact that you guys currently charge, say, $850 from Blue Cross for an active premium, that's great. But what I care about is, well, what would they charge for an 80-year-old and an 81-year-old and an 82-year-old? And it's not $875. It's more like, $3,000. So we need to reflect the fact that older people in general will use more healthcare services. And the question is, the shape of that curve, we have steepened the slope of that curve based on research. And so in so doing, that means that as a percentage of your claim pool, a higher percentage will go to retirees. So that adds $10 million to the liabilities. We also increased the expectation of future healthcare costs, because I can't speak to what you've seen for a renewal this year, but I can tell you that across the nation, we are seeing a lot of 10, 11, 12% renewals on the healthcare side. And so we've updated our next 4 years or thereabouts on the healthcare side, cost inflation. That added about $7 million to the liability as well. Again, none of those things change the real cost of the plan. The cost of the plan is the benefits you pay out the door. I can assume healthcare costs double next year. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. It means that's going to be my guess, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And we also identified a fair number of retirees. Number of retirees went up, and we identified a reasonable number of active employees with 10 plus years of service that have not been previously provided. So that added a couple $1 million to the liability as well. So again, different things happened. A lot of things happened in the OPEB context. And here's the thing I would tell you is, good, bad, or indifferent, OPEB is much more volatile than pension plans, which, it is what it is. And the real reason for that is, pension plans are all based on pay. So if you assume people are going to get a 5% pay raise next year, you control that number and you give between 4.5 and 5.5. Stay pretty close to what you expected. On the healthcare side, if I assume healthcare costs are going to go up by 5% next year, they could go up by 15, they could go down by 5. You have no control over it because you don't control when people are going to go to the doctor, when they're going to get sick, what condition they're going to have, what doctor they're going to go to. You don't control any of that. So the healthcare is very much it happens and you pay the bill, but you have no way to really manage that cost. You do certain things, but the reality is healthcare cost is going to do what healthcare cost does. On the next page, we talk about what are the key assumptions that drive all this stuff. Well, the interest rate we spoke about, that went from 675 to 626. Termination rates, what's the probability everybody stays employed each year? You hire Johnny or Mary at 25, what's the probability they're still working at 26, 27, 28? They make it all the way to retirement age. They're now 55, 56, 70, 57 years old. What's the probability they retire each year? If they retire, what's the probability they elect to take benefits? What's the probability they elect to cover their spouse? What's the probability they're even married in the first place? And then the healthcare costs, we're currently assuming a 9% grading down to basically about 3.6% per year over the next about 40 years is what that works out to be. On the next slide, we just kind of talk about what your benefits are. You offer a very modest life insurance benefit that has almost no cost. Your healthcare costs for the active employees are slightly above the average we see. Your Medicare supplement plans are slightly below the average that we see. So you're in pretty good shape in that regard. On the next slide, you always, where do we compare? You guys are about 18% funded. It puts you basically in the top 20%. So again, you guys compared to your peers are doing a very nice job. Would you like to be better funded? Of course. But I mean, again, as I tell every client, there's only so many dollars to go around. And while people like me are always going to say, put more money in the OPEB plan, put more money in the OPEB plan, you are trying to run a town and schools and deliver services. So if you have a wonderfully funded OPEB plan, but you can't get the buses to school on time, probably not the best use of your money. So we want to have a seat at the table when the decisions are being made about where to deploy resources, but we recognize that we are not the only capital need that the town has. On the next slide, how am I doing versus my neighbors? Your discount rate is compared to some of your neighbors, and again, there's plenty more, but these are just some. Compared to the statewide average, your discount rate is better. Compared to some of your neighbors, you're right in the same basic ballpark. Your service cost per active employee is less. A lot of that has to do with the fact that your Medicare supplement plan is cheaper than what other people are offering. And also the fact that you're a 60-40 town in terms of cost sharing, that obviously helps as well compared to some that might be 75-25, or we used to have some that are 90-10. So your guys' cost ratio there is a little bit less. Lincoln is another town that's been funding aggressively, not surprising. They have a very nice discount rate. If they're going to control it 34%, but there's plenty others that are not funding as aggressively. So again, you guys, like I say, are in the top 20%. Encourage you to continue funding, but I also recognize that when the ARPA money runs out in about 18 months, it's going to be a lot more challenging for everybody. So do the best you can, and certainly we'll try and do whatever we can to help on our side to help make that happen. Some folks just want to see how do my various departments. Well, not surprisingly, your public safety is going to have the highest service cost per employee, simply because they retire earlier and have a shorter working career. So we are amortizing their liability over a shorter period of time. Therefore, the service cost is going to be a higher number. Otherwise, some of these other groups are small groups. You can't really draw much from it. But people like to know, what do various employees cost me? That's what they cost you per year above and beyond their salary in terms of liabilities being added to to your balance sheet. And then the next slide, the projection.
Could I ask a question on this chart?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So where you have separate columns for public safety and sewer enterprise and stormwater, so are those also included in your town employee column, or were they extracted?
They're not included in the town numbers.
So town employee is everybody except them, basically,
Correct.
except them in the schools?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we break out the numbers. I know for Matt and the auditors, they lump it all back together again, except for the enterprises. But we've had a lot of towns who will ask, hey, I'm curious to what public safety costs me. I'm curious what the schools cost me. So we try and break out the numbers. You can always add them back later, but at least gives you data, and then you can do with it as you will. On the next slide, the where is this all going? The thing I encourage people to do is, if you look on the left-hand side of this, you're going to get terrified because the numbers accelerate over the next 40 years, and you go from 100 million to 360 million. And your first thought is, why even try? The numbers are ridiculous. We can't possibly win at this game. But if you go to the far right, we put everything into present value terms, back into today's dollars. And you go from 101 million in liability to 114 million over 40 years. So you're going to go up by about 13% over a 40-year period. A very manageable number. If you can manage this number on your balance sheet today, you can manage it 40 years from now. The pay-as-you-go cost, the cash-out-the-door cost, that is going to go from 3.5 to 5.5. So that's going to go up by about 55%. That's a not insignificant number. But the things I tell people is I compare it to Social Security. You have 40 years to make adjustments. You can make minor adjustments throughout time, be they in cost sharing, be they in plan design, in terms of what benefits you offer, be they in prescription drugs. Or you can be like the federal government, wait until we get to 2033 and say, hey, guess what? Social Security's broke. Who saw that coming? Now what do we do? If you guys want to be more responsible than the feds, I would just encourage you to make modest adjustments to your plans over time. And again, this will take care of itself. You can wait until the plan becomes unaffordable and throw up your hands and do something. But I think, honestly, the adult approach is to make modest changes while you can. And here's the thing. In 2061, at that point, the plan is fully funded. You start taking the $5 million out of the trust. You just pay the bills just like you do in a pension plan. You take the money out of the trust each year and you pay for it. And you can certainly do that. But obviously, if you make modest adjustments to the plan, you get fully funded quicker. And it's also more manageable and more from an ongoing standpoint, can you do it? On the next couple slides, John and Darlene had asked us to kind of show you guys from the enterprises kind of what happens. So we look at the sewer department. The sewer department at current forecast gets fully funded in about 2036. And then the next slide, you'll see the stormwater. They also get fully funded in about 2036. And cable gets fully funded in about 2031 based on current funding plans. So again, the one thing I can assure you is that things are going to change. You're going to hire more people or let go of people. Your populations are people are not all going to retire at the date we say they're going to. They're not all going to live exactly as long as we expect. Healthcare costs are not going to do exactly as we forecast. But 2 years from now, we will adjust these numbers yet again and reflect the data that exists at that point, what your population looks like, what your healthcare costs have done. And, we'll adjust it again. And hopefully, healthcare costs stay under control. We can show big gains and say they did not go up by 9%, they went up by 0 or 2. That would be wonderful. The one thing I would tell you folks, and this is where everyone always, starts wondering, how can I manage OPEB? The one thing I would say is, I'm not saying you shouldn't look at the active plans, you absolutely should. But as far as OPEB goes, the money is in the Medicare supplement plans. That's about 70 to 75% of your liability. So if you're trying to manage your OPEB plans, that's really the place where you focus your energy. So you do things with the prescription drug plan. You do things with, some of the services that you offer, be they, it could be emergency room visits, it could be, you name it. I mean, your healthcare consultants can work with you on that. But my point is, if the goal is simply to manage OPEB, Medicare supplements where you do that. Now, the reality is your active healthcare costs are likely double what you're paying right now on an annual basis, what you're paying on your OPEB plan. So I'm not saying you should ignore the active plan. I always say that that's not going to be a place you're going to see the OPEB savings, but you will see actual real cash savings every year. So you should certainly address the active plan, but that's not going to have a huge OPEB impact. So, and that's really all I got. Questions, comments, concerns?
Questions?
I have a quick question for Parker.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you said, so we're looking at 9% health insurance increase going down to 3.63 in 2060. I think I know the answer,
Yep.
but how do you project out that far and come up with 3.63% rate of?
Yeah, how do actuaries come up with these stupid numbers? A very valid point, and I will tell you, actuaries make this a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So here's the thing. We used to basically use a simple model that would have us, let's say, 4.5% a year from now until the end of time. But actuaries, being what actuaries are, designed this very fancy model that takes into account general inflation, real GDP growth per capita, healthcare costs above and beyond inflation each year expected. When do we think healthcare is going to hit a certain percentage of GDP? When do we think that will create a resistance point in terms of what people do? And when do we want to pick a year in which that will limit GDP growth? So there's a lot of variables that go into this. And so basically, short answer is our healthcare costs grade down to 5%, and they go down to 4.77 for a period of years, and then slowly degrade to 3.63% in 2060. It's a very complicated model. The reality is, if you averaged it out, it works out to be about a 4.6% annual rate from now until the end of time. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. I prefer the old methodology because it's a heck of a lot easier to explain to folks. But unfortunately, actuaries and their actuarial standards decide we have to, for lack of a better word, show your work. So now we have a much more complicated model that is very difficult for people to understand, but it makes actuaries feel that they're smart because look at all the cool numbers we put behind them. But again, I'd say 4.6, 4.7 is about what it works out to be on an annual basis if you just simply replaced it with one rate across the board.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Paul, just a curiosity on the point he made about the biggest place the biggest leverage management point is in the insurance area. Mm-hmm. What do we do there? Have we taken measures or?
Yeah, the biggest thing we did is, and it was noted if you go into his detailed report, 3 years ago, but John, Darlene, correct me if I'm, we moved people who weren't, out of Medicare, who did not have
Yep.
the ability to join, Medicare. We basically funded the cost for them to join, because in the long run, you're better off having the federal government pay that than the town. Now, Parker, you want to speak to that concept? That
Yeah,
was a
100%.
huge saving, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We encourage a lot of people to do what we call Medicare buy-in, which is that, because again, the federal government Medicare, they want to pay 70% of the bill. That's about what Medicare covers from a healthcare cost. If you don't have them in Medicare, you guys pay the full bill. And the feds, I'm sure, would be very, very happy with that. But the example I give people is, like in our report, you'd see for an 80-year-old male, we assume in the regular HMO, that's about $33,000 a year. If they're in a Medicare product, it's $4,200 a year. So the federal government would like to pay $28,000 and go, no, we got that. And so that's why we encourage people, get these folks on the Medicare and let the federal government pick up the bill. But to your point in terms of what you guys are doing, your guys' Medicare supplement plan is already below the average of your peers. So you guys have already done a really nice job of addressing that. My only point is, if you're trying to find other places to address it, yeah, that's where the money is. But I think you guys, again, compared to your peers, are in pretty good shape. It's not like you guys are, giving away the store here and going, look at us, we got this gold-plated plan. Your plan is a solid plan, but there's not a lot of, I guess to use the words, a lot of, waste and fat and things to go after here. It's a legitimate plan, but it's not giving away the store by any means.
And Parker, our claims are not, our rates are not based on our claims, correct? So,
Yes and no. I mean, claims factor into it, in the sense of going, you guys are part of a pool, but it's not your claims alone.
right, it's not directly related.
Yes.
So if we spend a ton of money on wellness programs, we're not going to necessarily see the ROI on that, because it's going to be a small piece of the larger pool. So when you talk about maybe affecting the outcome on the retiree pool, and you said, look at prescription drug copays, things like that, you're looking at the cost sharing on the front end to affect that cost savings.
Well, again, so you're a 60-40 town. You could go to a 50-50 if you wanted. That's actual legitimate savings. Or again, the prescription drug, again, the plan itself would be a less generous plan if you did that. So as opposed to a $299 plan, it might be a $279 plan or $265 plan or whatever. So again, if you offer, less drugs in the formulary, you will pay less money. Or if you have more generics and so on. That's something you have to work out with your healthcare to do that. And again, I'm not suggesting you should. I'm saying, but that's in terms of where the money is. Because here's the thing I would tell you is, in most states I work in California, Texas, South Carolina, there's really 4 ways you can cut costs. One is you can change the actual underlying benefits, which is the hardest thing to do. You can change the cost sharing. Well, you guys are 60-40. You can only go to 50-50 in Massachusetts. We can't, like in other states where I vary it based on service or things like that, we can't do that here. We could change it we can change the eligibility. In California, I changed one to be, you have to be 62 years of age with 25 years of service to get the benefits. We can't do that here. So those are the kind of things we do in other places you can't do here. And we've already made everybody go to Medicare, so we've done that one. So really, the only thing you're really left with is you can move off of 60-40, but there's not a ton of money to work with there because 50-50 is as low as you can go. Or it's really addressing the prescription drugs is the big other place you can go. That's really, from a pure cost savings perspectives, those are the only 2 places you're really going to go. I mean, you could potentially save some money on, and I'm not suggesting this, so don't take this the wrong way. You could say, hey, listen, guys, after the death of a retiree, we're going to tell the surviving spouses that they have to pay 100% of, we're not going to give them the subsidy anymore. They're going to pay 100%. We have had people do that. I'm not suggesting you should. That's none of my business. There is savings to be had there, obviously, but it is also the uncomfortable thing to say, oh, by the way, your spouse just died, and oh, by the way, I'm going to raise your insurance costs. So there's not a right or wrong answer to those things, but those are the places where you can find the money, if you will.
Do you see any benefit in outsourcing the prescription drugs to, negotiate your own contracts, or?
So splitting it out, I mean, people do that, not so much in Massachusetts. The corollary to that I would give you is a related issue is the Medicare Advantage plan, which I'm sure John and Darlene have been pitched 18 times by now by various people walking in their doors. And here's the thing, they can save you money, but you have to be honest about the fact the reason they save you money is because they are really largely a benefit cut in one way, shape, or form. I mean, the insurance companies didn't just decide one day, I'll take 10% less. They take 10% less because they are providing less benefits. So you can do things on the prescription drugs in terms of outsourcing that and splitting that out to be a second benefit. But again, the reason why they're going to be able to do it at a cheaper price is because ultimately, their ability to negotiate with the carriers is not any better than what you have today. The savings come from simply being able to design a formulary to take certain drugs out of it that happen to be expensive. It's really as simple as that. And again, very few of your people probably use those drugs, but the ones who do think they're very important. And that's the balancing act of any kind of a product like this is, 95% of your people say, I saw nothing change. 5% saw a very big change. And that's something you have to decide if you're okay with that.
So basically, it's you raise price to the people who are paying the premiums, you cut benefits, or you raise copays. And if that's not the policy of the board or the town manager, then we're where we are. We're where we are.
Exactly. And like I said, you guys, I think, are in good shape. I mean, I know, nobody likes to hear that, but I mean, I think legitimately you guys have done a nice job. One of the gentlemen just mentioned a couple years ago, you guys already did a big task to try and take care of the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit's all gone. The things that are left are the things that are hard. And again, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do them. Those are, community issues you guys would have to decide. But again, as I said before, your benefits are they're not bad benefits, but they're also not overly rich benefits. I think they're fairly standard benefits. You guys have done a very good job of managing your costs.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Parker.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, I
Darlene
appreciate
and
it.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
And since John was here for the audit report and the OPEB report, we have him next on a procedural matter regarding vacating a foreclosure judgment on Acton Road. So good evening, John.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I provided the board with a memo just giving you some of the background and the reasons that the town received a foreclosure judgment in this case on 379 Acton Road. And I'm pleased to say that after we provided the 30-day eviction notice, which is required by law, the former owner did contact my office to make arrangements to pay the balance, and we received a full tax title redemption payment. Since we also collected, the owner agreed to bring their taxes up to date for fiscal year 23 for the first 3 quarters. So since the town has received full payment of all outstanding taxes, fees, and interest, I'd like to ask the board to consider voting the following motion that's in your packet. And it's basically to vacate the foreclosure judgment. Basically, essentially, the town's foreclosure attorney would return to land court and withdraw the case and in light of the payment. So I've also included a signature form just after the vote's taken. If you would just sign that, just so we have a written record of the board's decision.
John, how do you pronounce the gentleman's last name?
I believe it's, I would pronounce it Sawish.
Thank you.
If there's no questions, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to vacate the final judgment covering the tax taking made against Harry J. Sawish Jr. for unpaid taxes covering the property at 379 Acton Road, Chelmsford, upon payment of all taxes, interest, and charges due as provided under Mass General Law 6069.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 in favor, 1 absent. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have an uplifting story after all this heavy financial stuff, is we have Jim Martin here from the Tree Committee. The Tree Committee, we've been working, and Ken's been the liaison, and I've been there, and Christine Clancy and so forth, and we have a proposal to do additional tree plantings at the town common. So good evening, Jim, thanks for coming, and I know you've got other members of the committee here with you this evening, and again, walk the board through your presentation, would be great.
Okay, well, the town manager contacted the tree committee and asked us to come up with some ideas for adding some trees to the center common. And I'd like to make a couple of statements. One of them is a plan such as this is only the first step in a journey. The trees have to also be installed properly and maintained over time to be successful. Otherwise, it's pretty much a waste. We have, and I've looked at this, and I think if everything goes well, these trees should last about 100 years. So that was kind of the goal. And we selected them to be varied. One of the things that you run into in municipalities is everybody gets the same tree. And that is monoculture, and that gives you problems the towns have had. We used to have a whole bunch of American elms. Dutch elm disease showed up. So they went to Norway maples, and that gave its own set of problems, including the Asian longhorn beetle. So we made a selection of trees based on relatively long-lived, relatively disease-free. Diseases can change and insects can change. But we've come up with some things. Here's the map. It's facing north. Down in the lower right-hand corner is the flagpole, just to give you an orientation. Right underneath the north arrow there used to be the old fire station. And then, of course, we have the monument in the upper right-hand corner. We've started the spidery ones. These are the existing trees, and I'm not going to say anything about them. The green trees are the ones that are suggested to be added. And each of them has a number in there. And then if you look over on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a list with numbers and then the name of the tree. Total of 16. And just to give you an idea of what they look like, can we get the next slide, please? Or am I going too fast?
No,
No, you're fine.
Okay, now, if you look at these, I've got the name in the upper right or left-hand corner and the number in the upper right-hand corner. 1 and 3 would be American linden. Unfortunately, this is a picture. The plant is starting to lose its leaves for the fall, but gives you some idea of what the tree looks like. The next one to the right is Valley Forge elm. Again, has a different shape, has a different size. This is one of the most disease-resistant American elms that are available. To add a little mix, if we go to the next one, put in a red oak. Now, one of the things is you've got to look at these pictures and say, well, that red oak is probably about 100 years old. We're not going to plant that, but it gives you some idea of the potential. The thornless honey locust, this is a very common plant. It used to be real common, and then it kind of fell out of favor, but it gives you a different texture. Very light shade, very nice for grass. Unfortunately, the ginkgo, this is the fall color, gives you yellow. This is the best picture I could come up with at the time. Unfortunately, it's in fall color. Normally, they're green. The next one is London Plain. This is another good urban tree. Takes a lot of abuse. If you've ever been in Cambridge along Memorial Drive, that whole line, those are London Plains. And they're, again, probably somewhere around 150 to 175 years old. So they got some potential. Next, please. Again, another one that comes up with fall color. And this is black gum, also known as Tupelo. And then the next one to the right is Coosa dogwood. These are the ones we're proposing to put in front of the flagpole. Just to put two of them in there. Then we have a Colorado spruce that's presently on site that's in poor condition and it's going to have to be replaced. This is your Christmas tree. So we're proposing you put a replacement in now, and in a couple of years when the other one has to be removed, you've got a replacement. Though I would suggest using a green Colorado spruce rather than a blue one. And then the last one, these are Adirondack crabs, and we're calling for putting 3 around the Revolutionary War Monument.
I think you have one more, though, Jim. Is there one more?
And then last but not least, we just thought we'd throw a little whimsy in here, and this will be the purple prince, just to give a little bit, something a little bit different, that's all. So, like I said, the crab apples were selected because they were disease resistant, and most of the other trees have a good life expectancy. Are there any questions?
What's the time?
Yeah,
for
like I
this,
say,
Paul?
what I can, two things that probably come to mind. When is this going to happen, and how is it going to be paid for? The when it's going to happen is it's going to happen in spring, when the weather conditions allow, and also, we discussed this at the last meeting, we're also going to put protection around the trees, because they're obviously, as you said, they're not going to be 100-year-old mature trees. They'll probably be 6 to 8 foot plantings.
Yeah, I would
and then
assume that's probably what you're
we'll
gonna get.
protect them with
For about 3 years.
for about 3 years, so that way, they don't get hit by whatever is going on around the common.
Well, a dog and on the end of a leash can do it. It sounds silly, but it can do a lot of damage.
And then in terms of the funding, Christine Clancy, our Public Works Director, who's also in the audience this evening, and she'll be coming up next, but she is able to secure funding from National Grid, so that will cover the full cost of the plantings that have been presented this evening.
Oh, that's great.
And then on a good closing note, the other final thing we did is we're also coordinating with the Garden Club, Chelmsford Garden Club, for Arbor Day planting, and Jim's going to be working with the Garden Club to do complimentary plantings in front of the historic town hall, which there's some needed there. So that's also going to happen this spring at Arbor Day, which is the Friday, the 24th of April.
Last Friday in April.
Yep. So this is, again, I want to thank the tree committee, Christine, and everybody, Ken, liaison, everybody for their efforts, and we're excited that once the weather turns favorable to have this take place this spring. And as you look towards Memorial Day is scheduled for the center this year. So not only will we have the plantings in place, but we'll also have a sound system. We didn't forget that part of the equation as well. You'll actually be able to hear the activities as well. So we'll have a portable sound system that's solid, that's working with Pete Padula and Lisa Maroney on that as well. So it's good news for the next couple of months ahead.
Yeah, I did talk to the Garden Club. I made the recommendation that in front of the old town hall, I put in 1 or 2, one of the diseased American elms.
Probably 2.
Historic,
to be good. Yeah.
You go back in time and you look at the pictures, and had a lot of American elms around here. You got a historical building, maybe having that. They're going to talk about that, I guess, tomorrow in their next meeting.
That's exciting.
Peter, one of our members, going to fill you in a little bit on.
Hi, everybody. Peter Spawn, Tree Committee. Just 1 minute. I just want to thank the board and Christine Clancy for working with the Tree Committee. It's been, as a relatively new member, it's been really cool to see the teamwork, and particularly DPW, and thinking of some fresh ideas that the Tree Committee's been offering. And I don't want to get into any of this, but we've got some great ideas working together, also with Conservation Commission, the historic people, really everybody in town, to do some more, I think, pretty cool tree things that we would like to talk to you about a month or two or three when we get things together. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
That's great. I think this will be a great upgrade to the town center.
Thank you.
Really exciting.
I'll take a second, too, just to thank Paul and Christine, because I know the tree committee, they worked hard on this, and I just sort of sat in the corner and watched it all unfold, but it was a nice collaboration to see the energy that went in and their plans, and then discussing it with Paul and Christine, finding out ways to fund it, and it was nice to watch it all work. So,
Good.
thank you, Paul and Christine, and tree
Thank you.
committee.
All right, now we go back to the spreadsheets. Christine Clancy is here this evening with the monthly American Rescue Plan project report.
An exciting ARPA update. So for the month of February, of the $7.9 million, 4.3 have been procured, or 56% procured. Of which, of that 56% procured, 78% has been invoiced and spent to date. I think that was a uptick, or a pretty significant uptick from last month. We are currently still tracking. Our target is to procure all these projects by the end of the fiscal year, so we're still on target for that. And that remains that there's still $2.58 million in unallocated funds of ARPA funds. We are currently anticipating an overrun of $666,786. That's just down a little bit, and that's just based on our current projections. As we close out projects, we will have a more, that number is being refined on a monthly basis. I don't know if we want to switch to the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So this spreadsheet details all 46 projects. As of last month, we did color code it, so projects in blue are projects that are complete. Projects in yellow are projects that are partially procured and underway. Projects in green are also projects that are procured and underway. And projects in red are projects that have not been procured yet, but there's still progress being made, just not in the procurement or in design or in some other phase. So I just want to go over, if there's any questions too, I can answer, but just want to go over some highlights from last month. Number 3, the modular RTU replacement at the Chelmsford High School, McCarthy and Parker. So that information for bids, those will be issued in March, actually the first one posting next week. So we are pretty confident that procurement will take place by this April. Number 4, the controls at the schools. That punch list was completed this past February, just this past week. So that project is complete. We're just waiting on one invoice to come in, but we do know the total dollars spent on that project. Number 7 and number 10 on this spreadsheet. This is both the Byam and Harrington mechanical ventilation projects. These are currently out to bid, so I don't have the date in front of me, but I know that the bid opening date is in March. So we do anticipate a March procurement for that. Number 30 and 31, these are some of the sewer ARPA projects, the O&M and pump station in Force Main. Those final ports have been received. So I think we're just looking at, awaiting billing on one of those projects, but those projects have been completed. And then a big, I think this is maybe where a lot of the dollar value in terms of invoiced was the town's new fire truck that finally has been delivered. We received it here in town. It is being outfitted with some equipment, so it will probably not be put into use until April, but that's also a project update. Are there any questions on any of these items?
So from what you said, introducing this, by the end of June, we should know like where we stand and what's left to be allocated?
In terms of procurement, I mean, I guess there's always the chance that some projects, I mean, we'll know what's procured. There's
Right.
always the chance as projects are being, are underway, there could be a change order in the future. So we won't have that, we're not going to be complete, that's not going to be all spent, but at least procured. So I think we will have I mean, right now, I think we have a decent understanding of everything that's closed out or near closed out. I would say it's the projects in red and maybe some of them in yellow that but that's really what we need to target the next few months.
Mhm. Any other questions? Great, thank you, Christine.
And while she's there, Christine's going to provide us with the monthly Traffic Safety Committee report.
So I do have that update as well. There's a brief update. So under current actions, the police department continues to enforce and conduct monitoring in various areas throughout the town. And there's nothing to report on that right now, but that is ongoing, an ongoing activity by the police department. The next item under current actions is the request for the sidewalk at Raymond Road and Mill Road. I know this has been a request for some time. This has been reviewed and discussed with Mass DOT. Originally, we were proposing just a rapid flashing beacon at this location. The feedback from the state was that there are some sight distance, both horizontal and vertical sight distance concern in the approaches. So we need to really expand the project. How do you address those sight distance issues so that it's a safe crosswalk? So we are expanding that scope with a traffic consultant to look at some schematic design and associated costs. So likely it will be a more involved project than just installing a crosswalk. So we should have an update. Right now I'm just trying to finalize the scope of that consultant, but we will have an update in terms of schematic design and cost. That's the next action item for that. And then the under pending actions, the no after dusk parking at Thanksgiving Forest. It is pictured here on the left. This is a sign right now. I know it does say that there's the reservation is only open during daylight hours, but this request is currently under review by the Conservation Commission to see if they want to add any signage. And then under completed actions is nothing to report for this month. I don't know if there's any other questions.
So the Conservation Commission will make a recommendation as to whether or not they feel there should be additional signage?
Correct. So we do so all of our parks, and I mean, this reservation is under the jurisdiction of the Chelmsford Conservation Commission, so we can make a recommendation. All of our parks also are, I guess, a lot of say open till dusk or only during daylight hours. We don't have specific no parking signs.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be at really their, our recommendation could be, but really their discretion.
Okay. Any other questions?
And then we'll see Christina next month with the sidewalk plan and the paving plan, so that's on schedule. She'll be in next month along, which I know that we've been waiting upon, and that's, in the queue coming up.
Yes.
We can just give her a seat at the table.
That's what
Thank
she
you.
wants.
And I'll have an ARPA update next month too.
Showing up,
so.
all right. And she's out, and the roads will be plowed tonight.
Roads will be plowed today. I guess everyone probably started brining on the streets. I guess just one update on that is that we were looking at the numbers today, and every time we go out, we save about $4,000 just in salt material. So we just ran the numbers before the end of the day, and it was about almost $4,000 just in material that we saved. So that is, we'll have a report at the end of the season, an annual report, but we are increasing the amount of roads that we're brining.
But even in terms of the savings, do you want to talk about the experiment you did on Alpha Road? Because it's not only the savings, it's the safety.
Sure. So the way that brining works is a pre-treatment. It really sticks well to the roadway. What we did is we did a pilot on Alpha Road right in front of the DPW, and we treated one side of the road and not the other side of the road. So this was last Thursday, I believe, or last week. And after the storm, you want to see how the road cleaned up, and it really shows that the brining is very effective. So the way it was, we pre-treat with the brining material, and then probably right when we get to just before 2 inches, we plow the streets. In the pilot that we did on Alpha Road, the side that we brined really peeled up, and then right after we plowed, once the sun hit it, it was black. It was down to no residue. The side that was not brined still had a lot of snow on it. It was plowed, but you could tell that it was not as treated. So it really shows that the brining does have an effective treatment. It really helps better with the cleanup. So in terms of, I think it not only is it cost effective, but there's a safety aspect to it as well. So it was a nice picture. We can maybe show that around. This is just our pilot year as well. So we hope to, right now it's really focusing on the mains and if we can, the secondaries, but our goal is to be able to brine the town.
Is there less salt used in a brining process?
Yes, it's only, I think it's 23% to the gallon, 23% of it, so it's a lot less salt.
So it's less salt that works more efficient?
Yes. It does stick more, so I think one of the recommendations is to still wash your vehicles, because it will still stick to your undercarriage of your vehicle. So car washes, I know we clean our equipment after every storm. So it's still, it's salt. Salt is caustic, especially corrosive, but it is much more effective and it uses less.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you.
Christine.
Thank you.
So next up, we have the discussion regarding litter complaints with respect to the nip bottles by the liquor stores. So just to summarize, in some resident and town meeting rep concerns, I think there were 3 things raised. One was a concern with respect to litter being generated, specifically people littering nip bottles. The second was a question as to whether or not the town should consider banning nip bottles, and the third was a question whether or not the board should be considering anything in terms of its licensing terms. I will just say the board has not discussed this at all. It's only been on email, so this is the first discussion we are having to try to calibrate ourselves as a board. We have received 2 letters for public input that I'm going to, Vice Chair Ken LaFave will read. We'll see if there's any discussion from the board, and then we'll take additional public input. Okay? So, go ahead.
So the first letter is from Phyllis Jarvis from Drumhill Liquors. Good afternoon, members of the Chelmsford Select Board. It has been brought to my attention that the board is taking into consideration banning of alcohol 50 milliliter bottles. As the owner and manager of Drumhill Liquors for 42 years, I have some opinions I'd like to share with you regarding this issue. First, I totally agree that there's a littering problem caused by these bottles, as well as numerous other items being tossed out of vehicles. If you ban nips, you will still have candy wrappers, scratch tickets, cigarettes, coffee cups, and fast food wrappers along the roads. I see customers using these bottles as a way to limit their control of their drinking. In other words, they buy and keep in their homes only a certain amount of alcohol each day. That could be anywhere from 1 nip per day up to 10. Many people also buy a 200 milliliter bottle each day or a 375 millimeter bottle each day to keep the amount they drink under control. If you consider banning nips, where does it stop? Do you next ban 200 milliliter or 375 milliliter bottles, since I find these sizes littered as well? The point I'm hoping to convey is that I truly believe banning these smaller bottles may lead to people possibly drinking more. If Chelmsford bans nips, these consumers with these drinking habits will simply go right down the street to Lowell or Westford or even Nashua. I seriously doubt the city of Lowell would ever consider this proposal. We already lose millions of dollars of sales to New Hampshire not having a bottle bill. The only way for a nip ban to be effective would be statewide ban. The sale of nips accounts for 30% of a store's sales, especially in some of the smaller mom-and-pop stores who don't have the competitive pricing of larger bottle sizes. This ban would have negative economic consequences also because those customers frequently purchase other items such as soda, chips, cigarettes, etc. The behaviors you're trying to control, littering and drunk driving, are already illegal. Let's try to focus on broader enforcement of both. I would love to find a solution to littering, but banning nips in just this town is not it. I will be willing to post signs in my store to discourage this behavior. Actually, townwide mandatory signage may be a good place to start, but in all retail locations, something along the lines of a cigarette signage. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm available by email or phone. Respectfully, Phyllis Jarvis. So the other one is from Michael Mello and Maria Carries from, and Lodivia Santos from the Cask and Bottle Liquors. To members of the Select Board, as you know, the number 7 discussion regarding resident litter complaints suggesting banning of the sale of nip bottles by liquor stores is up for tonight. As owners of a local package store, this hits home to me and my family, not just as a major part of our business, but what we feel is an important part to many recovering and potentially recovering alcoholics. While nip bottles may find their way to the side of the road and look trashy, so do coffee lids, soda bottles and cans, fast food wrappers and straws. We will not and should not ban those items either. It is a problem, but a problem that should be looked at differently. In our almost 20 years in the business, we have had many customers who knew that they had a consumption problem and who every day was hoping that they could be their last. Banning nips eliminates one potential solution. Many customers use nips to wean off and control the amount of drinking. By banning them, these people will then purchase the next smallest bottle, but that might be a 200 milliliter bottle versus a 50 milliliter nip bottle. That is 4 times more per unit. As anyone who has dealt with someone with alcoholism knows, it is there, they will drink it. I think this could be dangerous to those people and their families, coworkers, anyone around them. As a business, nips are and continue to be a major part of our business for us. People who travel buy 50 milliliters as they are a legal amount to be carried on board. Like I said above, people who want to limit their consumption buy these to try to limit themselves. Nips also have an important job as an introduction of sorts of new flavors to potential customers. Most will not buy a 750 milliliter bottle to just try it, but if available, a 50 milliliter pricing is usually $1 to $5 per. I hope the board can look at this ban and agree before just banning an item because it could potentially be litter. Let's find a different way to fight the litter. Sincerely, the owners of Cask and Bottle Liquors.
Is there any general board discussion or questions before we open it up for more public input? Paul, I just had a question. Did we ever figure out whether the initial litter complaints were on public town land or private property? The town can only enforce littering on town property. Is that correct? I want to get clarity in that.
Yeah, when litter is discarded, in the right of way. And basically, I think if you go down there or these other locations, it's in both. There's some on the right of way, there's some on the private property. And I think that was even evidence in the concern that was raised to the board, is that it's present everywhere.
Okay. Anything else before we?
I mean, I'd have one request. I noticed both letters talked about that alcoholics or someone trying to wean off heavier usage might use a nip, which, by the way, is a New England term. I didn't realize that. But I don't know where they got this data. I actually, in trying to find a report or some type of a summary that verifies that argument, I found it's actually the other way, that it makes it even more purchasable when it's $1 or $5. Like a lot of the homeless will, because they might only have a couple bucks in their pocket, buy a nip bottle, but if they didn't, they wouldn't buy a bigger bottle. So I did see a study that said it works the other way, but if they have something that could verify some of these arguments, I'd like to see it.
Okay.
I just have a question, I guess, for Paul. So to ban nips we'd have to go to town meeting, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. We can't just do it by licensing or anything like that.
Somebody would have to sponsor a warrant article,
Okay.
a citizen or the board or someone else.
Okay. Yeah, I just want it clear that we can't make a decision
Right.
tonight whether to ban them or not.
Right, and like I said, this is the first time we've discussed it, so I'm not sure I expect a major path to closure tonight. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this topic? And I'll just go ahead. We've got some folks in the room, and I think there may be some people in the Zoom room. Just as a reminder, if you could please just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Carl Styling. I'm at 68 Moore Street and a town meeting rep for Precinct 10. To give you a little bit of background on why this even came up, and first, before I do that, I'd like to thank the chair for actually putting this on the agenda as a result of the email traffic that was going back and forth. The immediate issue was brought up by a fellow resident of East Chelmsford by the name of Ed Hill, who during Earth Day last year got involved in picking up litter in the area around his house, and then he started expanding beyond his house along Carlisle and the streets in that area of East Chelmsford. And he became very concerned about the amount of liquor, wrappings, nips, and just general litter that came as a result of what appeared to be items that were purchased at the corner cupboard, which is at the corner of Gorham and Sprague Avenue. Now, he sent out an email regarding that to the town meeting reps for Precinct 10, and it really rang a bell with myself because we're regular walkers around East Chelmsford, and we do a lot of the highways and byways of East Chelmsford, myself and my wife Dina, and we have found this to be true for years. And it's particularly concentrated in the area of where the corner cupboard's located. And the corner cupboard, it turns out, is located on a property that includes wetlands. There's a nice stream that runs in the back of the corner cupboard. And if you look down in that area, when it's not snow covered, you'll see just a tremendous amount of litter in there. Liquor, bottles, cans, just you name it. Anything that you can purchase at the store, you'll find there. And many times when I pass the store walking, I look in the back, and they have a dumpster in the back. The dumpster's wide open. And you know the winds that we have this time of year, that litter just gets strewn all over the place around the liquor store, the surrounding Sprague Avenue, and also Carlton, which is the next street up. You walk along those streets, you see it everywhere. You see it in the private property, you see it in the wetlands, you see it on the right-of-way. And in accordance with this email, I've also noticed over time that it's migrated. And it's not just those streets. Now it's Brickhill, it's Carlisle, and it's Marshall that we're seeing a lot of the litter on as people drive away from these places. In fact, got an example. My wife Dina brought a bag of litter. She's walked up and down Marshall, which is about a quarter-mile length, but it's a cut-through between Carlisle and Riverneck. So a lot of cars pass through there. And she walked up and down there about 3 times, and she picked up this bag, and it contains nothing but nips. And it's just along that quarter-mile stretch. And it's not as if we're out there every day patrolling it. This was like 3 times up and down the street. So it's a real problem. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is a systemic problem around Chelmsford, but I do know it's a problem around the corner cupboard. So the question is, in my mind, how this should be best addressed. I personally don't know if a town-wide ban is the correct answer for all this, because it is the livelihood of a lot of factory store owners, and I'm not sure we want to necessarily do anything that would hurt that, especially if there's not a problem in different areas of Chelmsford. But what I do think is that we could work with the owner, manager of the corner cupboard to make him a little more conscious of the environment that he's in, the neighborhood that he lives in or operates in, and also the fact that it would be good if we had his participation in helping to clean the neighborhood up. And then, next to that, there's probably something the board could do relative to sending someone of authority to speak to them about that, to see if there's anything that they can do, whether it be signage, whether it be making sure that his dumpster's closed, whatever it is, to make sure that we can control the litter a little bit better. And then another option might be actually putting conditions on the liquor license, which the board has some control over. That might be an option to also encourage him to be a little more cognizant of how he operates his store. And I think last would be a complete ban on nips for Chelmsford. I don't think that's something that this particular issue would necessarily drive towards. There might be other people in other sections of town who might also want to participate, then that would be a different story. But at any rate, that was what I wanted to say on this, and I appreciate your time and effort in taking a look at this issue.
Thank you.
So, I'm Dina Styling, 68 Moore Street, and I differ a little with my husband. I'd like to see these things banned. You know, and these are not the result of someone trying to cut back. They're drinking. These are people that are drinking and driving through our neighborhoods and tossing them out before they get home. So, and I've also, this, again, just, you know, this group of bottles was collected in less than 3 weeks. This has been dumped in our neighborhood. On Marshall, there's also some bottles along the brick kiln end of Shed Lane are also thrown through as people come through. And they're coming obviously from the corner cupboard, they're buying it, they're drinking it in the car, and they're throwing the bottles in our neighborhood. So, you know, I know there must be some different things we can do about it from my viewpoint, and I've also done a lot of Earth Day cleanup in the neighborhoods. Yes, there are candy wrappers, yes, you know, there are scratch tickets. The majority of trash, I would say at least 80% of trash that I pick up on Earth Day, and a lot of other people do, are these. You know, there are a lot of beer cans, there are a lot of beer bottles. You know, I would say these first, and then you see the cans and the bottles, and then the candy wrappers, the scratch tickets. So, you know, I ask you too, when the snow melts, for you each to please go over, walk around the area, corner cupboard, and just look. I spent 3 days pre-COVID cleaning that area. It was pristine. I pulled plastic out of the wetlands to make sure the brook could run through. Within less than a month, you didn't even know that I had done anything. So I don't even walk on that street anymore. I'm so disgusted and upset because it's a beautiful area and it has a really nice natural area and wetlands there. And it's just being trashed. And I know in the past, and I believe that Mr. Hill, who contacted my husband about this, have also tried to talk to the people at the corner cupboard. They are nice people. They're really nice people. But they don't see the litter. They don't see the need to clean it up. So I think when I cleaned up the wet area and all of that before, and I talked with someone in the town, the resolution was they were going to put a trash can in front of their store so that the scratch tickets and things could go in that. Well, that lasted maybe 6 months. I don't know if there are trash cans even in front of the store anymore. But I do urge you to go look around that whole building and that whole area before you consider the liquor license again. Again, I would like you not to take it away from them because this is their living, and they really are nice people. They just don't see that litter, and they don't see the need to take any responsibility to be a good neighbor and clean it up. So Thank you for your consideration. These will now go into our recycling.
The other thing you might consider, I just recalled when she mentioned that, was stormwater management. Certainly, it is a wetlands that we're dealing with. There's a stream running through that, and there's a lot of litter that's polluting that stream. And I know we spend a lot of money and a lot of time on cleaning out all the drains and sweeping the streets, but this is definitely contributing to whatever we want to try to avoid with that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. We have one more in the room. I have one in the Zoom room also, but come on up to the podium first.
Madam Chairman, John Harrington, 149 Boston Road. Gee, after hearing all this testimony, especially from Drum Hill and the other package stores, I've taken away a lot of my comments here. And especially the gentleman here that gave an excellent report, in my opinion, on a problem area in his town. That store's a problem area. It makes all the other liquor stores look bad. And for them to say that those owners don't see that, I find that hard to believe. If you look at our other liquor stores in town, they take pride in the appearance of their property. And I don't know if the Board of Health can help in that area, but what they're going through, I feel, is not necessary, and something could be done to train them or whatever. But that's a shame. We don't, anybody in our industry, we want good reputations for us and to serve the public. NIPS are important. If we buy NIPS in this community, we're going to go to Lowell, Burica, or so forth. Now, I know it was just mentioned that that particular package store, it's all their NIPS. Well, it could be, but you have people coming from Lowell, you have people coming from Burica, and they could be just chucking them out. It might not all be that store. A good percentage of it possibly is. So I wouldn't 100% blame them, but I would definitely check on them if you could. I don't know if it's the Board of Health or whatever, but they need to be looked at. But with that being said, the letter from Drum Hill kind of caps everything off. If you buy, excuse me, NIPS from Chelmsford, they're going to go someplace else. Or they're going to buy the next size up. I found with NIPS in my particular operation, as the largest store in town, as well as Drum Hill, we weren't a big seller of NIPS. However, holiday time, we sold a lot of NIPS in gift baskets and so forth. And like Drum Hill, Harrington Wine and Liquors at the time always had, we were stores of destination. Customers expect us to carry everything. So NIPS were very important to us. Maybe not most of the year, but certainly coming into the holidays, they were very important. And that would cut into our base. Now, the smaller mom and pop stores, that cuts into their base year round. They will look at the small sizes, whether it's nips, pints, half pints, and so forth. Stores like mine in Drum Hill, we're more into the 1.75s. That's our main product of sale. So this bill would hurt the mom and pop stores. The larger stores, yeah, would survive, but we wouldn't be a full service store. And with that being said, I can go on with, but Drum Hill hit a lot of things, what I would have said. But I did have a chance to talk, excuse me, to the executive director of Massachusetts Package Stores Association, which I'm still a member of. His name is Rob Mellon. And here's something unique that's coming up. The association has never supported the bottle bill, has always fought against expansion of the bottle bill. When I say association, Mass Package Stores Association. And this year, there's legislation in there to increase the bottle bill. And in the legislation that Mass Package Stores support is to put nips, or miniature bottles, but nips into the mix. So that in itself is unique for our businesses in the Commonwealth to help sponsor. And I think that will help with picking up the litter that is a problem in some places in this community, and I'm sure in other places. Not in the whole community, but I think if that legislation goes through, and there's 6 bills from the House, 3 bills from the Senate, they're just waiting to get numbers assigned to them, and the hearings will start in the spring. So with that being said, there might be a solution that everybody can live with. Any questions?
Thank you.
Welcome.
In the Zoom room, we have Lisa Marchand. Is that?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you just
Okay.
confirm your name and address, please?
Sure. My name is Lisa Marchand. I live at 5 Amble Road in Chelmsford. I just wanted to make a comment on the earlier comment regarding curbing alcoholism with NIPS. I've been a healthcare provider for the last 20 years, and I'm not familiar with any evidence-based medicine that, people that suffer from substance use disorder would be using NIPS to curb their alcoholism. That would be an effective form of treatment. The evidence does show in diverse communities of economics that people that tend to use NIPS are those who are on a lower socioeconomic level, or adolescents who are not of the rightful drinking age. So, if NIPS are becoming a problem, then maybe this should be coming up at the town hall meeting to potentially curb them, along with, if there's a lot of pollution in the waterways, maybe the town should look at curbing single-use plastic bottles in general, or setting up more recycling bins along the outer parts of the town in the, where people are walking, like in the center or along the bike trail, to discourage littering. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in here or in the Zoom room. Oh, Maria in the Zoom room?
Yeah, I just want to kind of make a quick
wait.
comment. My name is Maria Series. I am someone that represents the Cask and Bottle Liquor Store, but I'm also a resident of the town. So the address would be 313 Littleton Road. But I do a lot of Earth Day pickup. I pick up around Hart Pond, and I also pick up around a lot of the soccer fields because my daughter plays soccer. And I'd say I understand the comment they're making that if they're cleaning up around that liquor store or that convenience store, that those are the items they're going to see. When I'm doing pickup around the areas that I pick up, it's less those bottles and more the water bottles, the Gatorade bottles, the dog poop bags and those things, because that's what's happening in those areas. So I don't think our problem is necessary maybe just those bottles because it's happening in that area, but it's happening kind of everywhere. So to the point that Lisa made, having more convenient recycling, more education on not littering, that type of stuff, or punishing those that do litter would probably help a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else at this point. I'm going to go back to the board for discussion.
I think one of the best thing I heard tonight was what Mr. Harrington said about possible a rebate or whatever on a nip bottle.
Deposits.
A deposit on the nip bottles. I think if that were to happen, the issue would definitely decrease. The problem would definitely decrease. The other thing, as was mentioned in the email from Phyllis at Drum Hill, is if this were a statewide initiative, which would be the next best thing, I think, because they're right. I mean, if people are just going to go to the next town or somewhere else. There's so many things I think that would be a better solution if the legislature would take action and do something at the state level. So Those two, I think, are good alternatives. We could also consider putting it on the town meeting warrant in October, just so that the entire town could speak about it. I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Just to start a conversation?
Right. And maybe end one. I mean, we don't have to make that decision right now, obviously. We haven't, several months.
Can I just get clarification from a legal standpoint? What are the different options that we do have? There's litter enforcement. The wetlands was brought up for this one particular area.
So the question with regard to the wetlands, are they related to the liquor store itself? Or are they just in the area surrounding it? I really don't think that you have any authority to impose any sort of fine or restrictions on the store owner for something that occurs off-site after it's been purchased by one of their customers. But I do think if it's on-site, you certainly can include something within your license renewals regarding keeping the site clean and picking up all bottles within the site. But once you leave the site, I don't see how you would have any authority. And there's not really a nexus because it's out of the seller's hand. Once they leave their property, wherever they wind up consuming it and wherever they wind up disposing it, they don't really have any influence over that.
If the litter is occurring on, some of it's occurring on town property, and there's been an assertion that some of it's occurring into the wetlands in the stream, is that something that's not enforceable if?
It's enforceable if it's observed, but you have to be able to actually identify the party.
We have to have somebody, we have to have the manpower or cameras or something out there to observe it.
Right. But again, just because somebody purchases an item at a store and then litters somewhere off premises on public property, that's not the fault of the person who sold the product, it's the fault of the person who committed the littering.
It's lack of respect. That's really what it comes down to. But
Paul, have we looked at, is that even feasible?
We've spoken
Litter
to Chief
enforcement?
Spinney. He can increase patrols in the area for, but again, they can't be there all the time.
Right.
these are usually people that are drinking in their cars. They're, driving out of the parking lot and tossing them out the window. It's not like you're going to, if there's a police car sitting there, they're not going to be
doing it when he's there.
You wouldn't think.
You wouldn't think.
You would hope.
You'd hope.
Or if then they do have a problem. But
So I think some of the things that, Pat, you mentioned are really longer term. I guess what I'm struggling with, is there an action that can be taken that would maybe start to help alleviate the issue, whether it's localized or whether it's in other parts of town as well? So, like, there was a suggestion made, could we have a discussion that includes the owners, or could the town have a discussion that includes the owners to see if they could help even with signage or containers? And I understand that once it's off the property, there's nothing they can do about it, but are there other things that can help?
Of a warrant article that would actually ban, the sale of nips within the town, I think that there would certainly be an incentive of the owners of these package stores to actually work with the town to try to figure out a solution.
We notified all the owners, including this establishment, of
Right.
this meeting
And
this evening.
there's some in the Zoom room too, I see.
so
Do we have anyone here from the corner cupboard? No? Okay. Go ahead.
So after listening to all this and thinking about, Maria, when she spoke, kind of made the point of what I was thinking. I like to walk, and when I walk, my wife won't walk with me because I pick up trash, and she says it slows her down. But so I do it in our neighborhood on Tuesday nights because trash night's Wednesday, and I can throw it in other people's barrels. But and I run,
Does that.
yeah, and I run around town, and and like I live near Parkhurst, so when I run down Parkhurst, when I am coming from Drum Hill, the amount of nip bottles are insane on the sides of the, I mean, it's just, I could fill up that 5 times in
Right.
2 weeks.
That's not much, I don't
Right.
think.
No, I thought you would have more.
Yeah.
But as you make the turn and you head up Smith, they start to taper off, and by the time you get up to Stedman, there's less. And it's clearly, the further you get away, it's less. That's not Phyllis's fault, right?
Right.
But people leave, and I had a friend who fought, he was an alcoholic, and he fought it for years. I didn't know, his wife didn't know. He would go to the liquor store on the way home, he'd buy 3 or 4 nips, he'd chug them as quick as he could on his way home, put some mints in his mouth and walk in the house. And nobody had a clue he was having 4 drinks in 15 minutes on his way home. And they would kick in when he got home, and it helped him cope. And that, you're not gonna get those people, they're not gonna drink it and then go back in to get their 5 cents back. They're
Right.
still gonna throw them out the windows, because they're hiding it.
But somebody else will pick them up and get them
That's the
5
solution,
cents.
is what you're
Yes.
gonna get is someone else coming along and saying, oh, kids are saying, I can make some money. Now, I know Littleton, they had, you return 10 nips, you got a free scratch ticket. You know, and so my brother used to do that. He'd say to his kids, go pick up nips at the soccer field, and they'd come back and he'd go down to the liquor store and get his free scratch tickets. But it cleaned up the mess.
Why? It's just
Right.
that it gets done.
But it cleaned up the mess. So if the liquor stores in town came to us and said, listen, hold off on that, and we'll do something like, 10 nips, we'll give out a scratch card, and they all agree to do it, so there's no one competitive advantage, that would be a solution for me, but I would rather leave it up to the liquor stores to find a solution, because you're not gonna stop them from going
Right.
out the window, but you could stop it from, or you could find someone who's willing to now pick it up if there's an incentive to do it.
Right.
And I agree with Maria. I've also, I walk some of the conservation, and when you go to the conservation sites, there's no nips. It's, bottles and cans and napkins and plastic bags, and, it's a different trash pickup when you walk in different areas. But clearly, on the roads as you drive away from the liquor stores, and no offense, John, but I think I've seen it also when I walk on Summer Street, they're on the side of the road. I mean, it's what happens,
I thought you were barred from Summer Street.
Nope, they let me in last week. So, yeah, you gotta find the incentive, yeah. Sorry. But you gotta find an incentive to get someone to pick it up. I don't think you're gonna solve the problem. I mean, I know Boston banned nips, but we're not Boston. I mean, I don't know.
There's other towns that have.
Yeah.
How many,
Falmouth.
what do we have? We have 7 establishments that sell nips, is that correct?
7 liquor stores.
Yeah.
Like, would it make sense to offer to just get a couple residents and see if a representative from the stores want to get together and just
I'm sure that every
talk and
package
get some
store
ideas together?
owner knows who their
Can you get to the mic?
I'm sure that every liquor store owner knows who the people that buy nips are. I mean, isn't people that just buy nips once
hope
in
not.
a while? You know what I mean? It's something that, it's almost like, it's probably a daily situation with most of them, right? So they gotta know who the people are, so they just gotta tell them, be careful, because, we're gonna get in trouble, and be watching, or whatever. It's just not right to do what you're doing, if you're doing it. So just be careful, because we're getting a lot of complaints. I mean, you'd say, John, when somebody came into your store and you were a big time, when you were running the whole store, you know what I mean? You knew exactly almost when the person comes through the door, you almost knew what they were gonna buy, didn't you?
Absolutely.
All right, so that's what I'm saying about the nips. Everybody that's coming in to buy a nip, you know who they are.
So what does that gain?
So maybe the
Well,
sign says
talk to the
toward daily
people on the
nip
package stores
purchases.
and tell them, talk to the people that buy their nips, and tell them what the story is, and what happened here.
But maybe you put up a sign that says toward daily nip purchasers.
Whatever.
Please be mindful of,
Well, you're
Right,
joking about
no.
it, but you just told me about a guy that did three.
But one of the letter from Phyllis said, I'd be willing to put signs up, I'd be willing to.
Yeah.
That's something to start with, but.
I think if the package store owners are willing to be part of the conversation, that maybe that would be a good place to start.
Absolutely. They know who the people are to use them, buy them. I mean,
and I'm not necessarily sure that you would pass it, that it would pass a town meeting anyways, but.
Did you want to say something as public?
I have a question, actually.
Name and address.
Ashok Patel. I'm not a resident, but a business owner in Chelmsford. Hi, guys. Does the town have an existing, any kind of law that has a ticket for littering? Like a speeding ticket, like if you get
For
caught,
littering,
it's $10, $100, $50, something like that? Do you know what that amount is?
Probably $25.
No, I think it's more than that.
$50, I think it's
Maybe it's
$50. But
Yeah, 'cause
Do we have an idea on how many we handed out in the last 12 months?
you know how hard it is to see someone litter?
I'm just
It's
asking.
2 seconds and the police
Right,
officer should be looking right at
I
them.
understand. I don't know if there's any data is available.
We got two Pauls looking on their computers over here, so.
Because I think your problem is not nips or anything. I think the problem is litter in general. Like
It
I said,
is.
there's a lot of litter everywhere. Perhaps you guys ought to consider raising that to like $100, maybe $200, and put some invest in some cameras everywhere so you can,
I don't know if we in Massachusetts can use cameras as enforcement. I know you can do like speeding tickets in New York, but you can't do it in Mass.
Can't do it, man.
I think you need to have a live officer.
Paul, do you have a department that would, if there were to be some more discussion and then bring something back to the board, is
Well,
there a department that would be,
I mean,
Anyways, just an idea. I think if you raise the bar,
yeah?
you're going to probably warn people that, hey, this is not worth doing.
I don't even know how you'd communicate it to the people who do litter. Cause
You'd have to catch them,
Yeah.
like you said.
You have to catch them.
You'd have
Well,
to
you can
find
put
them
up
a few
signs
times.
and, people will read. If it says 500, I'm sure they get their attention.
Oh, you got high
They'll
hopes.
be sneakier.
We put up signs, and then people show up and tell us they never saw the new signs,
Hmm.
so.
True. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, what
No,
was it?
I would definitely contact the Board of Health from tonight's meeting about the concerns that we heard about the dumpster over there and litter on the property. That's where I would start.
But
and then-
what
and then
I'm
speak-
saying is if, there's steps that could be taken now, right? We could try to go catch every litterer, which is not practical. We're not going to be able to do that. We had the suggestions about, the Board of Health is one immediate one, but then we had suggestions, I think, that were in different ways coming at, can we have a bigger discussion about this, or have a discussion that maybe includes a couple residents or precinct reps or the liquor stores, and just see if there's other ideas that we could come up with, whether it's a sign in the store or more receptacles in town that address the littering issue. And what I'm trying to figure out is there a next step that we put on a next agenda to say, okay, we've gone back and we've digested this a little bit, and maybe here's something that we want to do next, whether that's a town meeting warrant article or whether it's a group of people who are going to look at, who care, who are going to talk about litter and ways that we might be able to help minimize it more. Go ahead, sir. Sure.
Good evening, my name's Johnny.
Johnny Hope.
Johnny Artiega, part owner of the Wine Rack and 210 Boston Road.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to bring a suggestion. I know the problem is littering, but why don't you guys think about community service or approaching it that way? Because you're saying the problem is the trash, and people aren't not gonna stop just throwing trash. They're still gonna do it. So if you do some type of community service or a program that cleans up that trash, that people are still doing it, because people are just gonna be people. That's just the nature of how things
you.
work. So
we do-
banning the nips it's not gonna help banning the nips unless they
Well, there's-
stated if they do it statewide, maybe that would solve a lot of the issues. But if they're not gonna do it statewide, people are just gonna go somewhere else or buy the bigger bottle. Then instead of seeing nips, you're gonna start seeing 200 and 375s, milliliters on the ground instead of the nips. So I just thought I would suggest about community service.
Thank
I think
you.
that's a good idea.
I mean, we do have a townwide cleanup.
That's only once a year,
That's
though.
once a year. But it's frustrating because I've participated, and you get an area nice and clean, and then 2 weeks later, you're out there doing it again. It's just-
There's school groups and stuff that are always looking for community service points, but I'm not sure that nip bottles is where I want to send them.
Or along that busy roadway with this
But
traffic.
the other, just to kind of finish out where I was before, the other comment that came up as an example about maybe bringing the store owners and the community together in a conversation was like Ken's example, that they implemented in Littleton. Something like that, you really do, where you turn in 10 nip bottles and get a scratch ticket, that one, Paul. So if you want to do something like that, you really do need buy-in from all of the owners, right? Or maybe they have other better ideas, but
And people would be bringing nip bottles from all over the region
Yeah.
here to turn them in to get that incentive. I mean, I think that's tough, and I think that's something that they, the owners have to decide themselves to do what they, if they might have an idea on how to.
they can decide themselves, but all I'm suggesting is should we help facilitate a conversation that involves all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I can reach out to Lisa Maroney and his business coordinator,
And it's not
provide some
punitive, it's we're
assistance.
looking
Yeah.
for help, because to Paul Haverty's point, it's out of their hands once it leaves the store.
Why wasn't the community guy from the police department? Why was it?
Right, that's what I was saying.
Community relations, he goes in, he talks to everybody in each package store owner and just tells them what the problem is. I guarantee you.
Get some
that they know
ideas.
who 98% of the users are. And all they do is just mention it to them. We'll see what happens.
But on the flip side, again, not being punitive, in an approach of collaboration, one of the liquor stores might have a solution or an idea that is fantastic. And
Right.
once put out there and shared with the other liquor stores, they may look at it and say, let's all do this. I don't know, but I like the idea of putting them all in a room with maybe the business development, and maybe you have the law enforcement from the police department and Board of Health, talk about it and go through it and see if they can come up with something that's collaborative and
Once they know that they
cuts
may
down.
be in trouble, with their license or whatever, they're gonna make sure that, people will be a little bit more careful.
So to the point George just made, Paul Haverty, I mean, the other suggestion was, do we have any recourse with the package store licenses? And I'm struggling with that because I'm not seeing like some violation or something that we're trying to address. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Other than if it's litter that's on their property, you can certainly require as part of the licensing that they maintain the property free of litter. But anything off property is sort of outside the scope of your authority as the licensing agent.
My concern is only to go in and ask for a little cooperation. That's all.
Right.
Right, but as I stated before, I think that
Agreed.
there is a tremendous incentive for these package store owners to work with the town to try to resolve this issue, because otherwise, there's
I mean,
this
if we
looming
don't,
potential
if
of
we
a
don't
town
put,
meeting
if
vote.
we don't put a warrant article forward, my guess is there's going to be a citizen petition.
So I think
So-
that there is a strong incentive for them to work with the town and try to find a solution.
So would a next step might be, Paul, for you to try to help facilitate this meeting in the next month or so, and then we come back and talk about
Yep.
what comes out of that? And if there is any near-term enforcement with the wetlands or anything else, I mean, your departments can handle that, right? Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Any last rounds from the public? I'm not seeing
Last
any.
round.
Saved
Final call,
rounds.
final call?
Save rounds. Sorry. That's an Army term, isn't it? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Okay, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next item then?
Yeah, the next item for the board's consideration is I have before you the warrant for the April 24th spring annual town meeting and the April 4th annual town election. The warrant has been reviewed by town council, Paul Haverty. It's identical to what the latest draft that I provided you 2 weeks ago at your last meeting. The only change was as a result of the planning board's review of the zoning article, there was some additional language added, result of that review. But there's 30 articles, and again, upon the board's approval and posting, approval this evening and signing of the warrant, it will then go to the constable for posting, and we'll be on our way.
Any comments or discussion?
Paul, when you present this year and you go through the budget, how much focus are we going to put on using the levy limit and deficits and potential deficits coming down the road? Like, do we actively talk about that to town meeting, or?
We will, yeah. We'll give an overview at the beginning of town meeting under Article 1. We will we'll give a financial overview of what's being before the board and then sort of where we're going. I mean, and I'll get into my report thereafter. I mean, as you can see, things are a little bit up in the air with the new legislature and the new governor. But we'll do the best that we can and to sort of, give our best insight as to what's going on. The problem is, by the time town meeting arrives, we'll have the House's version of the budget that's under debate in the House. They won't have completed it by town meeting, but at least we'll have a sense on what the House is considering. And then from there it'll go to the Senate, and then resolution, then finally by the governor. And then the other wild card that even was introduced today is the whole issue of where is the state going with its tax policy and so forth. I mean, I think the best thing right now is that there's a lot of uncertainty. But yes, at the time of town meeting, we'll give our best insight in terms of where we are and what we foresee in the future. I think given the numbers that we're seeing now, I think, I think we're seeing that the budget should be stable over the next few years because of the unprecedented amount of local aid that's being directed towards education that was never on the table,
In our share of it.
In our share, yeah. So, and in fact, in speaking to Dr. Lang in the school department, he's going to reach out to Roger Hatch, who is a former state official, to get real insight into, there's still a couple more years of this, the Student Opportunities Act funding to see what that might mean for Chelmsford. Because we fared greater than our neighboring communities in terms of the Chapter 70 educational aid. We've always been a minimum aid community, and clearly that's not the case this year.
So you just touched on it. So when we get the information of Chapter 70 money, does that then increase the school's budget, or does it decrease the town's liability to the school?
It would reduce the levy is what it would do.
That's the answer I wanted to hear.
Yeah, that's the answer. We're not proposing any budget changes, and I hoped I'd made that clear, weeks ago when I presented the budget at the end of January, that this is the information that we have, and regardless of what comes out of the new governor's proposal, which will be formally released this Wednesday, and comes out of the legislature at the end of the fiscal year, that'll be unchanged. And so if things were to go the way they would be, we would be under the levy limit. And tomorrow night, weather permitting, the superintendent is presenting the school budget, but nothing's been modified in terms of, the school budget line number or, staffing or anything.
But basically, it frees up the town side of it, and that goes right towards the levy limit.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's great. That's fantastic.
Is that excuse me?
No, go ahead.
A straight line, more or less, improvement per town, or, I mean,
I don't
some
want
towns
people
getting, that have been, like us, that have been on the lower.
Yeah, it's interesting, if you look at, the towns who've been underfunded for Chapter 70 fared well under this budget proposal, and not just Chelmsford.
Right.
And so I almost thought of reaching back, 15, 20 years, even before, back in the mid, 2000s, the people who took the buses to the legislature,
Day in the Hill.
Yeah, Day in the Hill, exactly. George being one of them, and Pat was in one time, and I was there. But that was even years before I arrived. That happened. And I felt like reaching out to those people and saying, "Hey, look, you're not going to believe what's finally happened, but it looks like there is some kind of an equalization of the Chapter 70 education funding."
Did we make, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Did we make any gain with either of the two towns that got a big lead on us?
Yeah,
huge.
Yeah, huge.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was concerned about.
We got an 18% increase in funding, and some of the neighboring towns got 0.9%.
In Boston, yeah.
And that's why I was a little leery. You see, Boston got less than 1% increase.
We got 18.
They're going to get
18%.
some other
And
way.
that's why I'm saying that's why I said it ain't over till it's over.
Listen, all those breakfasts with the state reps that I've been doing, they're paying off.
So,
But anyway.
just to Ken's question though, so there's always a budget book at town meeting, and there's always like a 5-year projection, but that's not, I don't recall that ever being like part of your presentation, and I think that's what he was getting at, not just the general environment, but can we give more at town meeting about what that multi-year projection looks like and what's contributing to it?
Yep.
Because it's buried in the book.
Yeah, but we always give the 5-year presentation at the fall annual town meeting, because that's what's called for. But what we will do is we will give, a clear understanding at spring town meeting. The reason it's done as fall is it's called for in the town's bylaws at fall town meeting and to give an annual update. Spring tends to be a busier town meeting, so that's kind of why but we will give an overview at spring town meeting of
Because that's the
where things
financial
stand.
meeting.
Right.
Yeah. I just had a couple of quick questions on the warrant. I didn't notice this before, but just for my own education, the ballot question, we only ask about what the language is going to say. We don't tell them what it's getting changed from.
No, the ballot question follows the charter amendment that was approved at the fall.
No, I
annual town
understand
meeting.
that, but we don't say on the ballot what the old language is, and now here's the new language. We only put the new language in.
I thought we usually put the adjustment.
Don't we tell people what we're changing it from to?
No.
You don't?
No, what the statute requires that you provide a summary of the action of the town meeting.
Okay.
What you may be thinking is when you have a warrant article, you have, the language on strike through or underline. The ballot question is just a summary of what transpired at the previous town meeting
Okay.
vote.
And I just, I guess for the board and I had a thought about something I'd like to see for Articles 19 and 20, which are the two zoning ones. So on Article 19, when that comes before the board in the presentations, can we show kind of the before and after?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what did it look like, and then what was it after town meeting, and what are we
Right.
what are we proposing here?
Yeah, in Article 19, it was language that was omitted, so there is no before.
Well, the
just
before would be what was there before before that town meeting when it was omitted, when it was
Right,
deleted.
it's my understanding it's the exact same language, but we'll verify that.
Okay. And then I'm not sure how the board feels, but on zoning articles, whenever we review these, we always have legal questions that come up. So do we just want Attorney Haverty here when we do that one? Or do you want to see how it goes and then? We typically tend to invite him back for a second discussion, so I was just wondering if we want him
We
here.
generally do that in April, when the board's seated after the town election, we have the board's recommendation on the warrant
Right.
articles. But we can have council
But
here
that'd
for
be,
that.
okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm thinking it's coming up in another, well, it is coming up in another month plus, after the
Plus.
election.
Plus.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just getting ahead of myself.
After April.
And what is this, Paul, I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out where Exhibit A goes with, in the warrant.
Oh, Exhibit A is the one with the easement. It's Article 25.
Wood Drive?
It's for Shore Drive.
Oh, there it is, okay, thank you.
Attached here too as Exhibit A, the plan
Yeah.
there too. And then what there will be at town meeting is there'll be a photograph, which is, much more clearer than just a survey plan.
And then I had one other question with respect to the budget presentation. Can we put some words in there about your thinking in terms of like the road infrastructure? I know there's like the same capital plan, but you had talked about, here's variables we might look at in the fall in terms of free cash or something, but just something that says there's going to be an intentional look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that will become clearer next month when Christine Clancy comes in and we present the sidewalk and road paving plan.
Okay.
Again, we haven't even received a draft of it yet, so it's not as though we've got some, sneak preview, but that we expect either your next meeting or certainly your final meeting in March to have that full plan in, and that would give us an indication as well as to what we would look in. And I think the big discussion, honestly, is not only the road conditions, but also the sidewalk, the sidewalk planning. The only comment that Christine passed to me, and it was when she heard back from the consultant, is it's all over the place, meaning there isn't, and you probably realize this being residents of town for, quite an extended time, there are gaps, a lot of gaps. I think the best way to describe it.
Okay.
And so it's not like, oh, if we can just, direct something to this one area, then the problem's solved. I mean, we know the priority is schools, but it's going to be pretty interesting, I'm told. But that was just a comment that was passed along to me from Christine when she spoke to the consultant.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'll take a motion. To sign.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we sign the spring annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4 in favor, 1 absent. Town manager reports.
Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, just a few items this evening. The first one, and I know the board's aware of it, and we're starting to get up, but I wanted to officially notify the board and make clear to the community. Last week, Chief Spinney informed me of his plans to retire at the end of May. Similar to what transpired when his predecessor, Chief Murphy, retired, my plan would be to once again utilize a consulting firm to conduct an assessment center for police chief candidates. My intention, as was the case when Chief Murphy retired, would be to limit the applicant pool to qualified members of the Chelmsford Police Department. And then basically, following my interviews with the candidates and the assessment center, I would intend to bring forth a candidate to the select board, for confirmation at the beginning of May, and then that would allow a couple of week layover, with the outgoing chief, Chief Spinney, with the new person comes into the position. So where it would go this evening is as soon as tomorrow, and I spoke to HR today, we'll reach out to the police lieutenants and deputy chief, inform them of the schedule and the qualifications for the position, and then, like I said, we'll roll this out because again, it's only 3 months away.
There will be an assessment center.
Yes, it'll be by a firm basically who does this type of work,
Right.
and the firm has actually done work in Chelmsford before with superior officers, meaning lieutenants and such, and sergeants, and also is done for neighboring communities. So it's going to be by a reputable assessment center to the community, and then again I'll conduct interview of the candidates, and then I'll bring forth a candidate for confirmation.
And how much insight will we have into that process?
The issue there is trying. I don't know what the assessment center report will be, so I can't. I don't know what. I can give the board an overview of what transpired in the assessment center, but I've not sat with the consultants to personally review what they're intending to do. But I will give the board a summary of what transpired in the assessment center. And I'll inform the board that, my discussions and interviews with the candidates and who I feel is best, served for that position. But I don't know what more would be appropriate in a public setting, in this type of environment. And again, that was how it was handled when Chief Murphy retired, and at that time, conducted a similar process.
Okay, I just want to understand the expectation, that's all.
Nobody can sit in on that, on the assessment center, observe?
No, I don't think, first of all, it's an all-day thing, and I also don't think it's appropriate, quite frankly. I will sit on the assessment center, but, I will, basically sit in, meaning I will, and then I will wait to hear back from the candidates, but I don't think it's appropriate for board members to sit in on an assessment center. It's not something I've done in the past or something I've seen take place in the past.
I don't necessarily know. I would agree with that. I don't know if that's a wise move.
I think it's
I would agree.
because it's not like grading a math test. I mean, it's basically it'll be the professional recommendations of the panel, and then be my assessment of incorporating the assessment center and my, my sense of the candidates. And obviously I will talk to Chief Spinney in terms of his experience with the candidates, because he's had direct supervisory experience with them as well. That'll all go into the calculus.
Does the center, their interactions only with the candidates?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if they interacted with the chief or you or.
No, I mean, no, they'll be interacting with the candidates. I mean, the chief will not be present, will be not part of the assessment center. Again, I will not have any active role in the assessment center. I'll probably just sit in the room, be quiet, and, not draw any attention to the sense, because it is, basically, an assessment center it's a role play. They address candidates on how they would handle certain circumstances and activities, and it's meant to depict the responsibilities that would take place, of a police chief. Is it perfect? No, there's no perfect mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know often, some people, but it is a useful assist in the selection process. I mean, the other alternative, and this is what happened prior to that, is, the previous case when Chief Murphy was appointed, is the town manager at the time came in and said, I'm seeking the confirmation of Jim Murphy for police chief. And that was it. There was no assessment center. There was, he just, I think, and that's why I have utilized an assessment center. I think it's another, it gives good insight, and I think it's a good experience, for those involved.
Okay.
Next thing I have is, we kind of touched upon this, revisions to the proposed capital and operating budgets for the town. As was noted, last Wednesday, Governor Healy's office released their FY24 budget recommendations regarding local aid, and then today they released their tax package, which is going to be parallel to that. What's to note is for Chelmsford and for statewide, they increased unrestricted general government aid, which used to be called lottery aid and additional assistance, by 2%. Which, as they note, is above the forecasted increase in the overall state budget, I think 1.7%. So they're projecting a 2% increase in unrestricted general government aid, which is not, a huge news-breaking item. What was news-breaking is on Chapter 70 school aid, they provided a 9.8% increase over the current fiscal year, which, as they noted, and I'm reading from their text, represented the largest nominal increase in the history of the program and the largest percentage increase in more than 2 decades. So, the numbers, as I noted earlier, the average was 9.8% of the increase in the total overall. It went from down to 0.7%, which would be $30 per student, to which some of our neighboring communities received, and the city of Boston received, as we noted earlier, up until there was some communities on the Cape that were in the over 20% increases. We were 18.8%, which was significant. So we've updated our spreadsheet, put in the local, and it's not just the local aid numbers, it's also the local assessments into the funding analysis that we have. That is the up until April, first week of April, we'll see the House Ways and Means version of the budget. So again, the town of Chelmsford would receive 18.22% in Chapter 70 aid. And like I said, we'll put those numbers into the system. It also increases the town's net school spending requirements, but that doesn't pertain to Chelmsford because we're well above net school spending. The other thing to note was Neshoba Tech. And you remember when Dr. Pidgeon presented her analysis just about a month ago, they're going to incorporate these state aid numbers, estimates, into their proposed budget. And that will obviously have ramifications on the assessments to the communities. But just to give you a sense, Neshoba Tech, their increase was over $800,000 or over 20%. It was 20.54% increase in Chapter 78 for the Neshoba Tech district. And then their regional school transportation went up by almost 14%, by over $74,000. So again, that's where things stand at this point. It's the best information that we have, and I assume that when the Neshoba Tech School District finalizes its assessment, which I guess is a meeting Thursday, then we'll just bake that number in and then move it through the finance committee and then.
Should that reduce our?
Yeah, it's not going to increase it by any means.
So it's a double win for us.
Yeah,
in a way.
right. What we got to look at is the whole issue of Chapter 70 funding between the town and districts, and see where that goes. So that's where we are with the state budget. The other thing that came out is, as I noted to the board by email, late last week, we also received our health insurance increase of 3.8% premiums. That was also a favorable outcome.
Below the 9.
Below the 9, yeah, that he was using. And I think it will enable the town to return its OPEB funding levels back, to prior pandemic levels as well, which will be helpful for the OPEB liability. So that's where we are with the budget at this point. The other thing I'll note is we can now formally speak publicly about the Mass Cultural Council's awarding to the Chelmsford Center for the Arts of a $10,360 cultural sector recovery grant for organizations program. We will, participate in that program. We appreciate that assistance. And then we also received notice late last week after the packets went out again of a $15,000 funding for arts grant through the CCA that will also move forward. I know Darlene in the accounting office got that notice as well. So again, it's another beneficial program. And then lastly, the question of the strategic plan came up from our previous discussion, and I did do outreach from the last meeting. I contacted Kristen Lass, who's the manager in Westford, who was previously in Shrewsbury, where they did the strategic plan that we had examined the document at the last meeting. She informed me that 18 months ago, when they contracted for that work, the cost was $74,000. And then at the chair's suggestion, I contacted Dr. Lang about the school department's effort in the fall of 2021 for a strategic plan for the school department. That cost the school department $135,000. Given the magnitude.
Was it just for that plan?
It was just for that strategic plan. This was not the Dore Whittier plan. This was a different company.
I thought you said there were other things that they did with that.
Yeah, there were, but coming back to Jay, this was separate and distinct from the Dore Whittier capital plan. So, I think, again, we could push that back, in both of those numbers, back probably to a $50,000 or $60,000 cost. But what I'm thinking maybe as helpful or viable would be to look towards our regional planning agency, Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, and reach out to the request for them to assist the town in the formation of a strategic plan. Because I think that they have the skill set to do it, and the new executive director has that planning background. So our two options at this point are, three options: do nothing. Second one is to go to town meeting and, probably the fall, to request funding for strategic plan, or three, look towards NIMCOG. And I would think that my recommended approach would be to look towards NIMCOG and see if they could assist us in that process.
Is there another option where you ask for, what is it called, interest?
Expressions of interest.
Expression
I
of
thought that's what
interest.
we were going to do.
And then, and then have them break down, and then look at it and say, okay, is there any piece of this NEMCOG could do that's sort of like the grunt work, and then work with the company with their output to get the cost under 50,000? I mean, just looking at, like, they give us a breakdown, said, here's, for us to do this, and we look at it and say, well, NEMCOG can give us the data and do all the data collection. I don't know. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what's involved. I'm just wondering if we did what do you call it?
We can do an expression of interest. That helps you give you a sense of what the cost would be.
Right. But do they also give you a breakdown of what they do?
They can give you a breakdown of what they do, but I'm not quite sure how they would segregate the components of it and how successful that might be.
But then if you wrote it out, though, you could you could say, well, this is what we want done with the results we've collected from NEMCOG, and send it out as an RFP that way. I don't know. I don't know what this thing looks like. But
you could, but I think what you're going to get is if you piecemeal it, your costs are going to go up. You know what I mean? When they kind of bring you that presented package, they're going to say, well, we can do A, B, C, D, and E, and this is what it's going to cost you. If you want to do parts C and D, it's probably going to cost it's probably going to cost you more than if they were
I just know, like,
standalone, than if they were part of it.
NEMCOG's doing this stuff all day long for municipalities, and I wonder if hiring an outside company, if you get a deeper dive and a more thorough follow-through.
Then let's pay for it. Then you're gonna have to pay for it.
I don't know, Pat.
I
You're
don't, I don't know if
So,
you
so Paul, what is your worry bead about going to town meeting? Is there a threshold over which you have to go to town meeting, or is your worry bead just the amount, the dollar amount?
two things. One is the dollar amount, and then two, I'm thinking of plan fatigue. Basically, that we have a number of plans, and I think at some point, people are going to push back saying, why do we have all these plans? Meaning, we've got a master plan implementation that we've spent, that was able to be done with NIMCOG to have done. Then we're going to have an open space and recreation plan, which again, we're looking for NIMCOG to do. And then now we're going to have a strategic plan. And then, we've got, I think.
I don't know how many of these plans town reps are aware of, though.
But
Right,
so let me just say something though. Plan fatigue. I mean, we've gone through many discussions about a strategic plan for the town of Chelmsford, which none of these other plans satisfy that, right? So it's not like we're looking to create another small tactical plan in a certain funnel within the town, conservation or the planning board. It's the strategic plan for the town, which then would define what are all those pieces where you want to take the deeper dives and the actions, just like we looked at in the example document from Shrewsbury. So the plan fatigue part, to me, we don't have a strategic plan for this town right now. And to me, that's really the overarching question. Now, I have no idea what NIMCOG's capabilities are with respect to strategic planning, okay, because I haven't seen it. But I think if we're going to put out expressions of interest, we should put one out to them too. Like, we don't know what the number is. We have one data point from Shrewsbury, one from the school system. And I think when we started down this path, we said, let's put out an expression of interest so we can just see what the interest level is and what the landscape looks like. And they could give us like a rough order of magnitude for planning purposes. Because my guess is it's going to be 50 plus or minus 20K, maybe up to over 100. It's going to be like a little bit all over the place, but you get an understanding of different dollar amounts, but also what people's true capabilities are. And I'm reluctant right now to just say, okay, let's go to NIMCOG, because I have no idea if they really have the capability there to do what we want done. Because I've never seen it, and I don't hear other towns using NIMCOG to create a town-wide strategic plan. I hear them hiring NIMCOG to do these little piece points here and there. And it's not the same as a master plan. It's different.
Two thoughts. One is we can ask NIMCOG and find the answer out.
Let's get some real information from them before
right.
we assume that's the path.
No, but clearly we can do that well in advance of fall town meeting. The second one, when I talk about plan fatigue, it's not saying that a plan wasn't worthwhile. It's like, how many people and resources can we devote to planning committees? We have a number of people, Ken knows, we're sitting at the table. We have, a dozen or so people
easily,
around the
yeah.
table, easily, at the master plan committee. And now we're going to crank up a open space and recreation plan committee. And then now we're going to have a strategic plan process. It's a question of, again, when I say fatigue, I'm meaning where do you get the people to?
You got to reach out
So
to people.
the question,
to do that.
if I can rephrase, I think the question you're asking is, how much are people going to feel taxed? Right. How much can we afford to ask people to participate in these planning efforts? And the question I keep asking myself is, can we afford not to?
Right.
Because year after year, for the last 4 years that I've been on this board, something comes in front of us, whether it's a growth plan or something else, and it all ties back to we don't have a strategic plan for the town. Like, that's what's going to help set the direction for all these questions that keep popping up from the bottom up. This is the top down. So I guess I feel like we can't afford not to do this, not
So-
that it's, can we?
What if we ask NEMCOG if they've done a strategic plan for any of the other towns under their council?
Give us an
And
example,
give
like
us
we
what
got,
they've
yeah.
done, and we compare that, if they have one, to what they did in Leominster, and see
In
what,
Shrewsbury,
or
yeah.
Shrewsbury, and see what the difference is.
I think that would be,
Or I think we can ask, you know, you now have different leadership and different, maybe we could ask Kristen what she can do as opposed to what NIMCOG has done, because I'm not sure the organization 5 years ago is the same as the organization that's
Or she can give us a sample of what she can do.
That's a good point. In fact, NEMCOG right now is doing their own strategic plan, which they expect to have done by middle of this year.
and are they doing it themselves, or are they bringing someone from the outside in to do it?
Doing it themselves.
Okay.
I think, that, you know, I mean,
That's a
NEMCOG,
conflict.
there's nobody from NEMCOG from the town of Chelmsford. I mean, we have a representative, but, I mean, you know, the management people, they don't really know the town.
But neither is any consultant we bring in, George.
How about our own people? How about our own people?
If you have the right people facilitating the process, they don't need to understand the nits and grits of the organization for which they're facilitating it, but they need to understand how to do it and how to pull that domain expertise out of the organization. And I mean, the reason that we started looking to the outside was I think we all agreed we don't really have that capability within the town, not a criticism, just a fact that we would have no reason to have that capability within the town. And for us to try to facilitate that is really a conflict. You can't facilitate and participate.
So
It
that
doesn't
end,
work.
you'll
So-
reach out to NEMCOG.
So I think reaching out to NIMCOG and finding out what is it that they can do. And I think, personally, I think we still ought to consider doing an expression of interest just to get the data point. What are you whispering, Ken?
You don't want to hear it.
Nope.
You don't want to hear what?
Nothing, no, I'm good.
What don't I want to hear?
I said I want a bathroom break.
Oh,
I'm dying over here.
I thought you were commenting about my comment. I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
Go
no,
ahead.
no.
You can.
Well, I think we're almost done. We're just going in circles right now. We're telling-
No,
I think those are the two paths, right?
Right.
I don't think NIMCOG's a bad idea. I just don't think we should dismiss the other part yet because we don't know enough.
So I think if we get something from NIMCOG,
Yep.
I guess the question is it serial or simultaneous? That's, I think, is the question. Do you want me to ask and get the proposal and probably have
Well, we have.
have Jenny come and present to the board what NIMCOG could do in terms of strategic plan, if she feels that's viable? And then based upon that, do we then go do an expression of interest, or should I be doing a expression of interest while I'm doing that? Because I think that's sort of the question of that I think we haven't resolved.
How quickly can you at least get an indication from Jenny of whether or not it's in the realm of what they can do? That's like a phone call, right?
Yeah, I'll get a hold of her tomorrow or Wednesday,
So we
depending on
should,
the weather.
yeah, so let's see what she says
Okay.
between now and the next meeting, and,
Exactly.
and then we'll figure it out from there.
strategic plan update at the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have meeting minutes for February 13th. Are there any amendments before we take a motion? If not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from the Select Board meeting dated February 13, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 in favor, 1 absent. I have an announcement on the determination of releasability of executive session minutes. The minutes for January 23rd, 2023, segments 3A and 3C were released, and the minutes of January 23rd, 2023, segment 3B were held. Liaison reports? George?
A couple of weeks ago, Ken and I went and talked in front of one of the classrooms at the high school, and then I know somebody else followed up, two groups maybe, I don't know. And I think it was a lot of fun, and I think it was entertaining, not entertaining, but also, educational for the kids, and I think I saw a lot of interest, and I think we should continue that because, they're the foundation. I mean, And then maybe they may bring something home and maybe get the parents,
Great.
excited about something, you know what I mean? And
They sent us a nice thank you card.
Nice.
that was because
And-
you did such a fine job.
And we're going to put that on our next agenda to talk about more.
Oh, good, thank you.
I did type
you.
up the notes, George, and I sent them to Christina.
You did a good job, Sonny.
Ken, do you have anything?
No.
Pat?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Last week, I think it was last week or the week before, there was a ribbon cutting at 9 Round Fitness, which is on Summer Street. As the name implies, it's a fitness, a small fitness center where they have 9 stations where you rotate around and do a different activity at each station for just a few minutes. You finish in about 30 minutes, and it's a pretty intensive fitness process, and you'll definitely feel better after you're done.
You
Guaranteed.
have a
do
workout
it?
while you were there, Pat?
Sure.
Wow, good for you. Did you join?
The other thing is, I just wanted to mention, I attended the last Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting, and they talked about, in fact, at the meeting was a woman from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail who was questioning if they had a recommendation on whether to approve the new signage that we saw a few months ago here. They had sent a letter to the board about a couple of things on the new signage that they had questions on and suggestions on, and never even got an acknowledgement that that letter was ever received, so obviously never got a response. So they asked the woman who was there from the board if she could follow up on that, and they expect to have something by the time of their next meeting in March, and they said at that time they expect to make a recommendation to us, so.
Yeah,
So do we need to
Robert,
put- do we
Robert
need-
Klinkham is asked to be on, will be on your next agenda in 2 weeks.
Okay.
For the approval.
Because they won't have another meeting before then.
I thought there was something we were supposed to approve now. That's what I was reading.
Because the way it was left was the email that came out last week was all communities but Chelmsford and Acton had not approved the signage.
Well, but this woman also said that they're going to go ahead with the signage anyway, so they're
Right.
not really waiting for us.
So that's what I'm saying. So I asked Robert, do you want to come in? He said, yeah, at least be on
Well,
the
maybe at
record.
that
Can
point, too, maybe
formalize
the
it.
Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee might show up with questions, I don't know.
Okay.
So anyway, that's my update on that.
The only thing I have is FinCom is going to continue their budget reviews on March 9th. And if there's nothing else, it's 8:41, and I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation on the North Chelmsford Water District PFAS claim, discuss strategy with respect to litigation on Ledge Road Commercial Trucking, discuss strategy with respect to litigation, national class action opioid settlement with Teva, Allergen, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, consider the acquisition of real property at 185 Pine Hill Road, review executive session meeting minutes from January 23rd, 2023, segments 1A, 1B, 1C, and 2, not to return.
Second?
Okay, roll call.
Aye.
George, Ken,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
I vote aye, and Mark Carrada's absent.
We stand here.
No, because we...